12 hours. That's all Ava Mercer has left before the state takes her son away forever. A single mother with empty pockets and nowhere to turn, she's just been handed an impossible demand: produce a legal husband and a permanent home by noon tomorrow, or lose custody of 6-year-old Eli. Sitting alone in a diner at midnight, tears streaming down her face, she doesn't know that the most dangerous man in the city is watching from the shadows. What he's about to offer will save her life, or destroy it completely. If you want to see how far desperation can push a mother's love, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Rosie's diner buzzed like dying insects, casting a sickly glow over the cracked vinyl booths and yellowing linoleum. At midnight, the place was nearly empty. Just a truck driver nursing black coffee at the counter and a woman in the back corner booth whose world was falling apart 1 second at a time. Ava Mercer pressed her forehead against her trembling hands, trying to muffle the sound of her own crying. The envelope from family court lay open on the table in front of her, its contents scattered like shrapnel. Motion papers, custody evaluation reports, a court order that read like a death sentence. The petitioner must demonstrate stable housing and a 2-parent household by 12 p.m., March 15th, or temporary custody will be granted to the biological father pending further review. March 15th, tomorrow, 12 hours from now. Ma'am? The waitress, a tired woman named Gloria who'd worked the night shift for 20 years, hovered nearby with a coffee pot. You want a refill? Ava shook her head without looking up. She couldn't afford the $2 she'd already spent on the cup growing cold in front of her, but she'd needed somewhere to sit that wasn't the cramped studio apartment she could barely afford, where Eli was sleeping on the pull-out couch while her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, kept watch. How had it come to this? 6 months ago, Ava had finally found the courage to leave Marcus Chen. No relation to her neighbor, just a cruel coincidence that they shared a last name. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of walking on eggshells, 3 years of hiding bruises under long sleeves and makeup. The final straw had come when she'd seen him raise his hand to Eli, their son barely 6 years old, for spilling juice on the carpet. She'd grabbed Eli and run with nothing but the clothes on their backs and $17 in her purse. The divorce had been ugly. Marcus had money, family money, the kind that bought expensive lawyers and favorable outcomes. Ava had worked double shifts at 2 different diners, saved every penny, and represented herself in court because legal aid was overwhelmed and private attorneys wanted retainers she couldn't dream of affording. She thought she was safe when the judge granted her primary custody. Marcus got supervised visitation every other weekend. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. She and Eli could breathe, but Marcus had never accepted it. 2 weeks ago, he'd filed an emergency motion claiming Ava was unstable, homeless, exposing their son to dangerous living conditions. His lawyers had presented a case built on carefully constructed lies. Photos of the shabby studio apartment made to look worse than it was. Testimony from a private investigator who'd followed Ava on her worst days. The morning she'd been late to pick up Eli from school because her car had broken down. The afternoon she'd broken down crying in the grocery store parking lot when her debit card was declined. They painted a picture of a woman barely holding on. And the terrible truth was, it wasn't entirely a lie. The court-appointed evaluator had been sympathetic but firm. Ms. Mercer, I can see you're trying, but trying isn't always enough. Your housing situation is precarious. You're month to month in a building with multiple housing code violations. You work 70 hours a week, which means your son is in inconsistent childcare, and you have no family support system, no partner, no backup plan if something goes wrong. I'm his mother, Ava had said, her voice breaking. I love him. I protect him. I don't doubt that. But Mr. Chen can provide stability, a house in a good school district, a steady schedule, 2-parent household with his new wife. The words had hit like a physical blow. Marcus had remarried already, some woman named Jennifer who smiled in court photos and had probably never met Eli. The judge had offered a compromise that wasn't really a compromise at all. If Ava could demonstrate stable housing and a 2-parent household within 30 days, she could retain primary custody. Otherwise, Eli would live with his father. 30 days had seemed impossible, but Ava had scrambled, searching for apartments she couldn't afford, filling out applications for housing assistance that went nowhere, even signing up for dating apps in desperation before realizing how insane that was. Then yesterday, Marcus's lawyers had filed another motion claiming Ava was deliberately stalling. They'd requested an expedited hearing, and a judge had granted it. The new deadline, tomorrow at noon. 12 hours. Ava had spent the day in a panicked frenzy. She'd begged her landlord for a lease instead of month to month, but he'd refused. She was a liability, he said, always one paycheck away from missing rent. She'd called every social service agency in the city, but no one could help on such short notice. She'd even swallowed her pride and called her mother in Ohio, a woman she hadn't spoken to in 5 years, but the number had been disconnected. By evening, she'd exhausted every option. There was nothing left to do but sit in this diner and try to figure out how to tell her son that everything was about to change. A fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. She pressed a napkin to her face, trying to maintain some shred of dignity, even though there was almost no one here to witness her breakdown. Almost no one. At the far end of the diner, in the darkest corner booth where the overhead light had burned out weeks ago, a man sat alone. He'd been there when Ava arrived, and he'd barely moved in the hours since, just sat in the shadows nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Vincent Kane didn't usually come to places like Rosie's Diner. His world consisted of high-rise penthouses, exclusive restaurants, private clubs where membership cost more than most people made in a year. But tonight, he'd needed to be somewhere anonymous, somewhere he could think. The meeting with the Volkov brothers had gone poorly. They wanted a larger cut of the shipping operation, and when Vincent had refused, they'd made thinly veiled threats about going to the FBI with information about his business practices. It was nothing Vincent couldn't handle. He had contingencies for contingencies, insurance policies on his insurance policies, but it was exhausting. 42 years old, and Vincent was tired. Tired of the constant maneuvering, the endless chess game where one wrong move meant prison or death. He'd built an empire from nothing: real estate, shipping, legitimate investments mixed with less legitimate ventures. But lately, he'd been wondering what it was all for. He had money, power, respect born of fear. But he had no one. The thought had been gnawing at him for months, growing sharper with each passing day. He'd never married, never had children, never allowed anyone close enough to become a liability. In his world, attachment was weakness. Love was leverage waiting to be exploited. So why did the emptiness feel heavier lately? Vincent had been about to leave, to retreat to his penthouse and the familiar solitude, when the woman in the corner booth had started crying. At first he'd tried to ignore it. Other people's problems weren't his concern, but something about the way she wept, quietly, desperately, like someone who'd run out of hope, made him pause. He watched as she pressed napkins to her face, as her shoulders shook with sobs she was trying to muffle. On the table in front of her, he could see scattered papers, official-looking documents with court seals. Vincent had excellent vision even in low light, a skill honed by years of reading situations and people. From his vantage point, he could make out enough of the letterhead to understand family court. The woman looked up briefly, and Vincent got his first clear view of her face. She was younger than he'd initially thought, late 20s, maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eyes red and swollen from crying. She wore a waitress uniform, black pants, white shirt, with a name tag that read Ava. No wedding ring, no jewelry at all except for a cheap watch with a cracked face. She looked utterly defeated. Vincent should have looked away, should have paid his bill, and left. This wasn't his problem, wasn't his world. He dealt in millions of dollars, international shipping routes, complex webs of legal and illegal enterprise. What could he possibly have to do with a crying waitress in a rundown diner? But then she spoke, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "I'm so sorry, Eli," she whispered to the empty booth across from her, tears streaming down her face. "I tried. I swear to you, baby. I tried everything." Something in Vincent's chest tightened. He didn't have children, had never wanted them. Too much vulnerability, too much risk. But the raw pain in this woman's voice cut through his carefully constructed walls. She was a mother, and she was losing her child. Before Vincent could think better of it, before his rational mind could override the impulse, he stood up. His movement caught the waitress Gloria's attention. She looked up in surprise as he walked past the counter toward the back booth. Ava didn't notice him approaching. She was staring down at a photograph she'd pulled from her purse, a little boy with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile, holding up a crayon drawing of what looked like a superhero. "That's a good drawing," Vincent said quietly. Ava's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise and a flash of fear. She instinctively covered the court papers with her hands, as if hiding evidence of her personal disaster. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, wiping at her tears. "I didn't mean to. I'll keep it down." Vincent remained standing at a respectful distance, his hands in the pockets of his expensive wool coat. Even in the dim diner light, he cut an imposing figure, 6'2", broad-shouldered, with dark hair graying at the temples, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance. "You're not bothering anyone," he said. "I couldn't help but notice you're upset." Ava let out a laugh that was half sob. "That's an understatement." She waited for him to leave, but he didn't. He just stood there, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity. She would have hated pity. Something else. Something almost like recognition. "I'm not trying to intrude," Vincent said carefully. "But if you need help, I might be able to offer it. Unless you're a fairy godmother with a magic wand, I don't think anyone can help me," Ava said bitterly. Then realizing how rude that sounded, she added, "Sorry. It's been a really bad day." "I gathered." Vincent glanced at the court papers she was trying to hide. "Family court?" Ava's defenses went up immediately. "That's private." "Of course." Vincent nodded once, starting to turn away. He'd overstepped. This was none of his business. But as he took a step back toward his booth, Ava's voice stopped him. "They're taking my son." The words came out in a rush, like a confession she couldn't hold back any longer. Vincent turned back slowly. Ava was staring at the photograph of Eli, tears running freely down her face now. "I have until noon tomorrow to prove I have a stable home and a husband, or my ex-husband gets custody. And I can't. There's no way. I don't have—" She broke off, covering her face with her hands. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. I don't even know you." Vincent stood very still, processing what she'd said. A custody battle with an impossible deadline. A woman with no resources, no support, facing a system designed to favor stability over struggle. The rational part of his mind was already calculating, measuring risk against reward. This wasn't his problem. He should walk away. But the other part of his mind, the part that had been feeling hollow and empty for months, was doing different calculations entirely. "What if you could have both by morning?" Vincent asked quietly. Ava lowered her hands, looking at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "What?" "A permanent home, a legal husband, everything the court requires." Vincent met her eyes directly. "What if I could provide that?" For a long moment, Ava just stared at him. Then she laughed, a sharp, almost hysterical sound. "Are you insane? Do you even understand what you're saying?" "Perfectly." Vincent's expression didn't change. "I'm offering to marry you." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and absurd. Ava shook her head, pushing herself further back into the booth as if physical distance could make this bizarre conversation make sense. "You're crazy. You don't even know me. You don't know anything about me." "I know you're a mother fighting to keep her child. I know you're desperate enough to be sitting alone in a diner at midnight crying over court papers. And I know that in 12 hours you're going to lose unless something drastic changes." "Why would you—" Ava's voice cracked. "Why would you possibly help me? What could you want from me?" It was a fair question, and Vincent had asked himself the same thing in the seconds between standing up and walking over to her booth. The truth was complicated. He could tell her about the emptiness, about the growing sense that his empire of money and power was ultimately meaningless. He could tell her that helping her might be the first genuinely good thing he'd done in years. He could admit that he was tired of being alone, and maybe this strange arrangement could become something real. But he couldn't say any of that to this frightened woman who had every reason not to trust him. So instead he said, "Let's just say I have resources I don't use for anything meaningful. You need help. I can provide it. That's enough." Ava was shaking her head before he'd even finished. No, people don't just do things like this. There's always a catch, always a price." "You're right to be suspicious," Vincent acknowledged. "But consider your alternatives. If you walk out of here tonight, what happens tomorrow at noon?" The question hit like a physical blow. Ava's face crumpled, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Exactly," Vincent said quietly. So what do you have to lose by listening? Ava wanted to argue, wanted to tell this stranger to leave her alone. But he was right. She had nothing left to lose except Eli, and she was losing him anyway. I can't pay you, she whispered. I don't have any money. I can barely afford rent. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Vincent considered the question. What did he want? A chance at redemption? A purpose beyond profit margins and power plays? Or maybe just the opportunity to be something other than the cold, calculating criminal the world saw when they looked at him? I want to help you keep your son, he said finally. Everything else, we can figure out later. Ava searched his face, trying to find the lie, the hidden agenda. But his expression was steady, almost gentle despite the hardness she could see beneath it. Who are you? She asked. Vincent Kane. The name meant nothing to Ava. She didn't move in circles where Vincent Kane's reputation preceded him, didn't know that his name made powerful men nervous and law enforcement frustrated. To her, he was just a well-dressed stranger making an insane offer. I'm Ava Mercer, she said softly, and I need you to understand something. My son, Eli, he's everything to me. If this is some kind of game, if you're going to hurt him or use him or... I won't. Vincent's voice was firm. You have my word. Your word doesn't mean anything. I don't know you. Then let me prove it. Vincent finally slid into the booth across from her, moving slowly so she could object if she wanted. Tell me exactly what the court requires. Let's see if this is even possible. Ava hesitated for another long moment. This was crazy, absolutely insane, but what other choice did she have? With trembling hands, she pushed the court documents across the table. Vincent read quickly, his expression neutral. When he finished, he looked up. This is what they want. Proof of permanent housing, minimum 2-bedroom residence in acceptable school district, evidence of stable household income, and a legal marriage certificate demonstrating a 2-parent household. He paused. Is that correct? Ava nodded miserably. That's achievable, Vincent said simply. In 12 hours? Ava's voice rose with disbelief. In less, if we start now. Vincent pulled out his phone, already calculating. I own several properties throughout the city. One is a house in Riverside Park, 4 bedrooms, excellent school district, currently vacant. We can establish immediate residency. I'll have my attorney draw up marriage documents and file them with expedited processing. The county clerk's office opens at 8 a.m. We can be married by 9 and have certified copies by 10. He spoke with such calm certainty, as if arranging a marriage and establishing a household overnight was no more complicated than ordering takeout. Ava felt like she was drowning. This is insane. You can't just... People don't do this. Desperate situations require desperate measures, Vincent said. You said it yourself. You're out of options. I'm offering you one. But why? Ava pressed. There has to be a reason. Do you want... She couldn't even finish the sentence, couldn't articulate all the terrible possibilities running through her mind. Vincent understood what she was trying to ask. I'm not expecting anything physical from you, if that's what you're worried about. This would be a legal arrangement, nothing more. Separate bedrooms, clear boundaries. Your life and your son's safety are the priority. And when the court case is over, what then? Then we reassess. If you want to end the arrangement, we'll handle it cleanly. Divorce, custody to you, no complications. It sounded too good to be true. Every instinct Ava had was screaming that this was a trap, that nobody did something this generous without expecting something in return. But a small, desperate voice in the back of her mind whispered, what if it's real? What if this is the miracle you've been praying for? I need conditions, Ava heard herself say. If we do this, I need rules, boundaries. Of course. Vincent pulled a pen from his coat pocket and grabbed a napkin from the dispenser. Tell me what you need. Ava's mind raced. Separate bedrooms, like you said. No physical contact, no expectations. Vincent wrote it down. Done. What else? Eli is my priority. Always. Any decision about him goes through me first. Agreed. And I need to know who you are, really. I can't bring my son into a stranger's home without knowing what we're walking into. That was fair, though it complicated things. Vincent had spent years building walls between his legitimate business interests and his less legal ventures. But if he was going to ask this woman to trust him, he owed her some truth. "I'm a businessman," he said carefully. "Real estate, shipping, investments. Some of my business practices operate in gray areas. I'm not going to lie and tell you everything I do is perfectly legal, but I keep my personal life separate from my work. Your son would be safe." Ava absorbed this, her stomach twisting. Gray areas meaning what, exactly? Meaning I've made enemies. Meaning some people would love to have leverage against me. Meaning that associating with me comes with risks. "You're telling me this might make things worse?" Ava's voice rose in panic. "I'm telling you I'll protect you," Vincent said firmly. "Both of you. That's the promise. But you deserve to know what you're walking into." Ava pressed her hands to her face, trying to think clearly through the panic and exhaustion and desperate hope all churning together. She thought about Eli, asleep at home, unaware that tomorrow might be the day he was taken from her. She thought about Marcus's smug face in court, about the way he'd looked at her like she was garbage he'd finally disposed of properly. She thought about the court-appointed evaluator's sympathetic but unyielding voice. Trying isn't always enough. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe she needed to do more than try. Maybe she needed to be willing to risk everything. "If I agree," Ava said slowly, lowering her hands to meet Vincent's eyes, "if I say yes to this, I need you to understand something. My son is my whole world. If you hurt him, if you put him in danger, if any of this goes wrong, I will fight you with everything I have. I don't care how powerful you are or what resources you have. I will burn your entire life down." Instead of being offended, Vincent smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his severe face into something almost warm. "Then we understand each other perfectly," he said, "because that's exactly the kind of mother Eli needs." Ava felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the possibility of hope. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll do it." Vincent nodded once, as if they just agreed to a standard business transaction, rather than something that would change both their lives irrevocably. "Then we need to move quickly." He checked his watch, 12:47 a.m. "I'll make some calls, get things in motion. Where's Eli now?" "With my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She's watching him while I try to figure this out." "Good. We'll pick him up first thing in the morning. No point in waking him now." Vincent was already typing on his phone. "Give me your address. I'll have a car there at 7 a.m. "A car?" Ava felt like she was being swept along by a current she couldn't control. "We have a lot to accomplish before noon. A car will be faster than— What do you drive?" "I don't. My car died 3 months ago. I take the bus." Vincent's expression flickered with something, not pity, exactly, but recognition of just how desperate her situation had been. "The car will be there at 7, he said firmly. "Pack whatever you and Eli need for a few days. We'll get the rest later." Ava nodded numbly, still half convinced she was dreaming. Or having a breakdown. Maybe she'd passed out from stress and this entire bizarre conversation was a hallucination. But Vincent was still typing on his phone, speaking to someone in a low voice about marriage licenses and property transfers, and a dozen other details that made this feel terrifyingly real. When he ended the call, he looked at Ava with an expression that was almost gentle. "You should go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be intense." "I can't rest." Ava's laugh was slightly hysterical. "I'm about to marry a complete stranger so I don't lose my son. How exactly am I supposed to rest?" "Fair point." Vincent stood, pulling out his wallet. He dropped several bills on the table, far more than was needed for 2 cups of coffee. "But try. Eli will need you at your best tomorrow." He was right. Ava forced herself to stand, gathering the scattered court papers and shoving them back into the envelope. Her hands were still shaking. "Vincent," she said as he turned to leave. He paused, looking back at her. "Why are you really doing this?" For a long moment, Vincent didn't answer. Then he said quietly, "Because I can. And because maybe it's time I did something that matters." Then he was gone, walking out of the diner into the cold March night, leaving Ava standing alone with the wreckage of her old life and the terrifying possibility of a new one. Gloria approached with the coffee pot. Honey, was that man bothering you? Because I can call. No, Ava said quickly. No, he was helping. Gloria raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She'd been working late-night diner shifts long enough to know that sometimes people's problems were bigger than coffee refills and small talk could reach. Ava walked out into the night, her mind spinning. She caught the last bus home, sat in the back, and stared out the window at the dark city streets. Somewhere out there, Vincent Kane was setting impossible wheels in motion. And in 12 hours, she'd either be walking into court with everything she needed to keep Eli, or she'd be making the biggest mistake of her life. When she got home, Mrs. Chen was dozing in the armchair, and Eli was sleeping peacefully on the pull-out couch, his favorite stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. Ava knelt beside him, brushing dark curls away from his forehead. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. He had no idea how close they'd come to losing each other. "I'm going to fix this, baby," she whispered. "I don't know how, and I don't know if I'm making the right choice, but I'm going to keep you safe. That's a promise." Eli shifted in his sleep, his small hand reaching out to grab hers. Ava held on tight, feeling the weight of every decision she'd made and every decision still to come. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Car will arrive at 7 a.m. sharp. Bring Eli's favorite things, books, toys, whatever makes him comfortable. The house is ready. My attorney will meet us at the clerk's office at 8:30. Everything is in motion. Try to sleep. V." Ava stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Thank you. I still don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you." The response came almost immediately. "You don't have to understand it. You just have to trust it. See you in the morning." Ava set the phone down and closed her eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come. In a few hours, she'd be putting her son in a car with a stranger, walking into a marriage that was as much a business transaction as a rescue, gambling everything on the word of a man who admitted he operated in gray areas. It was reckless. It was terrifying. It was the only choice she had. At exactly 7 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up in front of Ava's building. She'd been ready for an hour, 2 duffel bags packed with Eli's clothes and toys, her own meager belongings barely filling half of one bag. Eli stood next to her, drowsy and confused. "Mama, where are we going?" "We're going to a new place, sweetheart," Ava said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's going to be nice. You'll have your own room and Miss Mercer." The driver who stepped out of the car was professional, courteous, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Ava's rent. "I'm Thomas. Mr. Kane sent me to collect you and your son." Eli pressed closer to Ava's leg, suddenly shy. Ava squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "Thank you, Thomas," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The drive-through morning traffic was surreal. Ava watched the city slide past the tinted windows, moving from a rundown neighborhood to progressively nicer streets. Eli was glued to the window, mesmerized by the fancy car and the changing scenery. "Mama, is this a limousine?" he whispered loudly. "Not quite, baby. Just a nice car." "Are we rich now?" The innocent question broke Ava's heart a little. "No, sweetheart. We have some help right now, from a friend." "What friend?" Before Ava could figure out how to answer, the car pulled up in front of a stunning brick house in Riverside Park. It was nothing like Ava had imagined, not a cold, sterile mansion, but a warm, elegant home with a well-maintained yard and flower boxes in the windows. Vincent was waiting on the front steps, dressed more casually than he'd been at the diner, dark jeans, a gray sweater, somehow looking both approachable and impossibly out of Ava's league. When Eli saw him, he grabbed Ava's hand tighter. "Mama?" "It's okay," Ava said, though her own heart was racing. "That's the friend I told you about. His name is Vincent." Vincent approached slowly, seeming to understand that sudden movements might frighten the boy. He crouched down to Eli's level, a gesture that surprised Ava with its thoughtfulness. "Hi, Eli," Vincent said quietly. "I'm Vincent. Your mom told me you like dinosaurs?" Eli nodded cautiously, still clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "That's a great T-Rex you have there," Vincent continued. "I set up a room for you inside. Want to see it?" Eli looked up at Ava, seeking permission. She nodded, managing a small smile despite the chaos of emotions swirling through her. "Okay," Eli said in a small voice. Vincent stood and led them inside. The house was even more beautiful than the exterior suggested. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, furniture that looked both expensive and comfortable. But what made Ava's breath catch was how lived in it felt. There were books on the shelves, art on the walls, soft rugs, and warm lighting that made it feel like a home rather than a showpiece. "This way," Vincent said, leading them upstairs. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom that made Eli gasp. The walls were painted a soft blue, and there was a proper bed with dinosaur-themed bedding, a bookshelf already filled with children's books, and a toy box in the corner. "I took some guesses on what you might like," Vincent said, watching Eli's face. "If I got it wrong, we can change it." Eli turned to Ava, his eyes huge. "Is this my room? Really?" "Really, baby," Ava managed, her throat tight. Eli launched himself toward the bed, bouncing on it experimentally before diving into the toy box with the enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster. Vincent gestured for Ava to step into the hallway. Once they were out of Eli's earshot, he spoke quietly. "Your room is across the hall. Private bathroom, walk-in closet. I'm on the first floor, so you'll have the entire second floor to yourselves." "Vincent, this is—" Ava struggled for words. "It's too much. The room, the house, everything. It's what Eli deserves," Vincent said simply. "What you both deserve. And we need to leave in 20 minutes. The clerk's office is across town." Right. The marriage. In the chaos of the beautiful house and Eli's joy, Ava had almost forgotten the actual reason they were here. I should change," she said, looking down at her jeans and the nicest blouse she owned. "You look fine," Vincent said. "This isn't about appearances, it's about legality." 20 minutes later, they were in the car again. Eli secured in a car seat that had appeared as if by magic. He was chattering happily about his new room, his earlier shyness forgotten in the excitement of toys and dinosaur blankets. At the county clerk's office, Vincent's attorney was waiting, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Morrison who had a briefcase full of pre-prepared documents. "Ms. Mercer," she said, shaking Ava's hand firmly, "we have everything ready. The application is expedited, the fee is paid, and the marriage can be performed immediately. Do you have any questions?" Ava had 1,000 questions, but none that could be answered here. "No," she said. "Let's do it." The ceremony was clinical, perfunctory. They stood in a sterile office with fluorescent lighting while a clerk read from a script. Ava held Vincent's hand. His grip was warm and steady, and repeated words that felt both sacred and surreal. "I, Ava Mercer, take you. Vincent Kane." When the clerk pronounced them married, Vincent leaned in and kissed her cheek, gentle, respectful, nothing more than the ceremony required. Ava's heart hammered in her chest. They were married. She was married to the stranger whose calm competence was either her salvation or her doom. "Congratulations," Patricia said, handing them certified copies of the marriage certificate. "These are legally binding. The property deed for the Riverside house has been updated to include both your names, Mrs. Kane. You're now officially co-owners." Mrs. Kane. The name felt foreign in Ava's ears. "What time is the hearing?" Vincent asked. "Noon," Ava said, checking her phone. It was 10:15 a.m. "We have less than 2 hours." "Then let's make sure you're ready." Vincent's hand rested briefly on her lower back, a gesture of support, not ownership. "You're going to walk into that courtroom with everything they demanded, and you're going to keep your son." Ava wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to believe that this insane gamble would actually work. But as they drove toward the courthouse, Eli playing quietly in the back seat, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they had any right to be. Ava climbed them with Eli's hand clutched in hers, Vincent walking beside them, with the kind of quiet confidence that suggested he'd walked into far more intimidating places than family court. Patricia Morrison followed behind, her briefcase full of documents that would either save Ava's life or prove insufficient against the machinery already grinding against her. The building itself was imposing, all marble and cold authority, the kind of place designed to make ordinary people feel small. Ava had been here twice before, and each time the architecture had seemed to whisper that she didn't belong, that women like her didn't win battles in places like this. Mama, why are we at a big building? Eli asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous entryway. Ava knelt down, smoothing his hair back with trembling fingers. We have to talk to a judge, sweetheart. It's boring grown-up stuff, but it won't take long. Is Vincent coming too? Yes, baby, Vincent's coming. Eli seemed satisfied with this answer. In the few hours since they'd arrived at the house, he'd warmed to Vincent with the easy trust of childhood. Vincent had shown him where the kitchen was, promised him they could explore the backyard later, and treated him with a gentle respect that Ava hadn't expected from a man who admitted to operating in moral gray areas. They made their way through security and up to the third floor, where family court proceedings ground through human tragedies with bureaucratic efficiency. The hallway was crowded with lawyers, social workers, and families in various states of crisis. Ava recognized the look on some of the faces, the same desperate hope mixed with bone-deep fear that she'd been wearing for weeks. There. Patricia pointed to a bench outside courtroom 3C. Wait here. I'm going to check in with the clerk. Ava sat, pulling Eli onto her lap, even though he was getting too big for it. Vincent remained standing, his eyes scanning the hallway with the watchfulness of someone accustomed to identifying threats before they materialized. Ava! The voice made her blood run cold. She looked up to see Marcus striding toward them, flanked by two lawyers in expensive suits. Her ex-husband looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, handsome in a conventional way, with the kind of smile that had once made her feel special and now just made her feel sick. Marcus. Ava's voice came out steadier than she felt. She tightened her arms around Eli protectively. Marcus's eyes swept over her, then landed on Vincent with undisguised curiosity and calculation. And who's this? Another one of your mistakes? Before Ava could respond, Vincent stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Marcus and Ava. He didn't say anything, just stood there radiating a quiet menace that made Marcus take an involuntary step backward. This is my husband, Ava said, the word still feeling foreign on her tongue. Vincent Kane. Marcus's eyes widened fractionally. Even he apparently had heard the name. One of his lawyers leaned in and whispered something urgently in his ear. Your husband, Marcus repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. How convenient. You couldn't find a man to marry you in 3 years, but suddenly, the day before the hearing, you produce a husband. The timing isn't suspicious, Patricia said smoothly, appearing at Ava's elbow. Mrs. Kane has been in a relationship with Mr. Kane for several months. They simply accelerated their wedding plans when it became clear that Mr. Chen was trying to manipulate the court system. It was a lie, but delivered with such professional certainty that it almost sounded convincing. Marcus's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Brennan, who charged $500 an hour, stepped forward. We'll be filing a motion to dismiss this obvious fraud. You can't expect the court to believe that a woman who's been barely surviving suddenly married a wealthy businessman overnight. The marriage is legal and legitimate, Patricia countered. All documentation has been properly filed. Mr. and Mrs. Kane are co-owners of a residence in Riverside Park, which satisfies the housing requirement. Mr. Kane's income provides more than adequate household stability, and most importantly, Eli is thriving in his new environment. We'll see what the judge thinks, Brennan said coldly. Daddy? Eli had been watching the exchange with wide, confused eyes. Now he wriggled out of Ava's lap and took a hesitant step toward Marcus. Marcus's expression transformed instantly into something warm and paternal. Hey, buddy, I missed you. I have a new room, Eli said shyly, with dinosaurs. That's great, son. Maybe you can show it to me soon. The casualness of the statement made Ava's stomach twist. Marcus was already envisioning a world where Eli lived with him, where these new developments were just a temporary obstacle. All parties for Chen versus Kane, the court is ready, a bailiff announced from the courtroom doorway. Ava stood, her legs feeling like water. Vincent's hand found the small of her back again, steady and grounding. You've got this, he said quietly. Remember, you're not the same woman who walked in here last time. You have everything they asked for. Ava nodded, trying to draw strength from his certainty. She took Eli's hand and walked into the courtroom, feeling like she was walking toward either salvation or destruction. The Honorable Judge Sarah Brenner presided over the proceedings with the weary efficiency of someone who'd seen every variation of family tragedy. She was in her late 50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that suggested she didn't suffer fools or lies. "Good afternoon," she said as everyone settled into their seats. "This is a continued hearing regarding temporary custody of Eli Chen, age 6. Mr. Chen has petitioned for primary custody based on concerns about the stability of the child's current living situation." "Ms. Mercer, excuse me, the file has been updated. Mrs. Kane was given 30 days to demonstrate stable housing and household structure. That deadline was subsequently moved to today at the petitioner's request." "Mrs. Kane, I understand you're prepared to present evidence of compliance." "Yes, Your Honor." Patricia stood, pulling documents from her briefcase. "Mrs. Kane was married yesterday to Vincent Kane. They reside together at 847 Riverside Park Drive, a 4-bedroom home in an excellent school district. I have the marriage certificate, property deed, and proof of Mr. Kane's substantial income." She approached the bench, handing over the stack of papers. Judge Brenner reviewed them methodically, her expression giving nothing away. "Mr. Brennan," she said finally, "your client's response?" Brennan stood, his expression one of barely concealed disdain. "Your Honor, this is clearly a fraudulent arrangement designed to circumvent the court's legitimate concerns. Mrs. Kane has been struggling financially for months, unable to provide basic stability for her son. Then miraculously, the day before this hearing, she produces a marriage to a wealthy man? The timing alone suggests this is a sham." "The timing suggests that Mrs. Kane took the court's requirements seriously and took steps to comply," Patricia countered. "There's nothing fraudulent about a legal marriage." "I'd like to call Mrs. Kane to the stand," Brennan said. "I think her testimony will reveal the true nature of this arrangement." Ava's heart dropped into her stomach. She hadn't expected to testify, hadn't prepared for questions designed to expose the truth she was desperately trying to hide. "Mrs. Kane, please take the stand," Judge Brenner said. Ava walked to the witness box on trembling legs. The bailiff swore her in, and she sat down, acutely aware of everyone's eyes on her. Marcus's calculating gaze, Vincent's steady presence, and worst of all, Eli's confused face as he sat with the court-appointed child advocate. "Mrs. Kane," Brennan began, his tone superficially polite, "how long have you known your husband?" Ava's mind raced. Patricia had said months, but lying under oath felt like stepping off a cliff. "We met recently," she said carefully. "How recently?" "A few months ago." The lie tasted bitter. "Interesting. And yet there's no record of you dating anyone, no social media posts, no photographs together, no witnesses to this alleged relationship. Isn't that unusual for a couple planning to marry?" "We kept our relationship private," Ava said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Private enough that your own mother didn't know about it? I have here an affidavit from Eleanor Mercer stating she had no knowledge of any romantic relationship her daughter was involved in." Ava's breath caught. Her mother, the woman she hadn't spoken to in 5 years, had submitted a statement against her? "My mother and I aren't close," Ava managed. "Convenient." Brennan circled like a shark scenting blood. "Mrs. Kane, isn't it true that you met your husband for the first time 2 nights ago in a diner where you were having a breakdown over these custody proceedings?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Ava's eyes found Vincent's across the courtroom. He gave the slightest nod, as if to say, "Tell the truth." But how could she? The truth would destroy everything. "Answer the question, Mrs. Kane," Judge Brenner said, not unkindly. We... Ava's voice broke. "Your Honor," Patricia interjected, "I fail to see how the timeline of Mrs. Kane's relationship is relevant. The marriage is legal, the housing is secure, and the child's needs are being met. That's what this court required." "The timeline is relevant because it exposes this as a fraud," Brennan shot back. Mrs. Kane was so desperate that she entered into a sham marriage with a stranger whose background, I might add, is highly questionable. "Objection," Patricia said sharply. "Mr. Kane is not on trial here." "But his character is relevant to Eli's welfare," Brennan argued. He turned to face the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a report on Vincent Kane's business activities and known associates." He approached the bench with a thick folder. Ava watched Judge Brenner's expression darken as she read through whatever was in there. "Mr. Kane," the the judge said, looking directly at Vincent. You're not a party to these proceedings, but given the circumstances, I'm going to ask you some questions. Please stand. Vincent stood, his expression calm but his jaw tight. Have you ever been convicted of a crime? Judge Brenner asked. No, Your Honor. Have you ever been investigated for criminal activity? A pause. I've been the subject of investigations that yielded no charges, yes. What is the nature of your business? I own several legitimate companies, real estate holdings, shipping operations, and investments, all properly licensed and taxed. The report in front of me suggests your business associates include known organized crime figures. I can't control who other people in my industry choose to associate with, Vincent said evenly. But I've never been charged with any crime related to organized crime or any other criminal enterprise. It was technically true, Ava realized. Vincent had been careful to say he'd never been convicted or charged, not that he'd never done anything illegal. Judge Brenner set the report down with a sigh. Mrs. Kane, please return to the stand. Ava's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap. I'm going to ask you directly, Judge Brenner said, her tone more gentle now. Is this marriage legitimate? Are you and Mr. Kane in a genuine romantic relationship, or is this an arrangement designed to satisfy the court's requirements? This was it, the moment where Ava had to decide whether to lie under oath or admit the truth and lose Eli forever. She looked at her son, who was watching her with complete trust, believing his mother would fix everything like she always did. Then she looked at Vincent, whose entire posture radiated, I've got you. Whatever you say, I've got you. And Ava made her choice. The marriage was sudden, she said slowly. And yes, the timing was driven by these proceedings, but it's not fake. Vincent offered to help me when I had nowhere else to turn. He's given my son a safe home, and he's treated both of us with more kindness and respect than... She stopped, but everyone knew how that sentence ended. More kindness than Marcus ever had. So, you're admitting this was arranged specifically for these proceedings? Brennan pounced. I'm saying that Vincent saw I needed help, and he helped me, Ava said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, we got married quickly. Yes, it was because of the deadline, but that doesn't make it fake. That makes it unconventional. Unconventional is one word for it, Brennan said dryly. Your Honor, this woman is so unstable and desperate that she married a man with documented connections to criminal activity, all to avoid losing custody to a stable, loving father who can provide... Loving? The word burst out of Ava before she could stop it. You want to talk about loving? Let's talk about why I left Marcus in the first place. Mrs. Kane, Patricia tried to intervene, but Ava was done being careful. Let's talk about this hospital visit when I said I fell downstairs, Ava continued, tears streaming down her face now, sir. Or the time I wore long sleeves in summer to cover bruises. Let's talk about what kind of father threatens to hit a 6-year-old for spilling juice. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Marcus surged to his feet. That's a lie. Your Honor, she's making up stories to... Sit down, Mr. Chen, Judge Brenner said sharply. She turned to Ava, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Kane, are you alleging domestic violence? Yes. Ava's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through the silent courtroom. I'm alleging exactly that. Why isn't this in the court record? Why didn't you report it during the divorce proceedings? Because I was scared, Ava said simply. Because he has money and lawyers and I had nothing. Because I thought if I just left quietly, I could protect Eli and start over. I thought the system would see that my son was safe and loved with me, and that would be enough. But it wasn't enough, was it? Because I'm poor, and I work 2 jobs, and I live in a studio apartment with code violations. None of that matters as much as Marcus's nice house and his new wife and his family money. She was crying openly now, but she didn't care anymore about maintaining composure or following Patricia's careful strategy. So yes, I married Vincent fast. Yes, it was because of this hearing. But I married someone who treats my son gently, who asks before he acts, who made sure Eli had dinosaur sheets in his favorite books. I married someone who offered help without asking for anything in return. And maybe that's not traditional, and maybe it's not what you wanted to see, but it's real. It's more real than Marcus ever pretending to be a good father for a judge. Judge Brenner sat back in her chair, studying Ava with an intensity that made her want to look away. Then the judge's gaze shifted to Marcus, whose face had gone red with barely suppressed rage. "Mr. Brennan, does your client wish to respond to these allegations?" Judge Brenner asked. Brennan conferred quietly with Marcus before standing. "My client categorically denies all allegations of abuse. Mrs. Kane has never filed a police report, never sought a protective order, never presented any evidence whatsoever of these alleged incidents. This appears to be a desperate attempt to—" "I have evidence," Vincent said quietly from his seat. Every head in the courtroom swiveled toward him. "Mr. Kane," Judge Brenner raised an eyebrow. "You have evidence of domestic violence against Mrs. Kane?" Vincent stood, pulling his phone from his pocket. "When Ava told me about her past, I had my security team pull hospital records, police call logs, and witness statements from her previous address. I took the liberty of having them compiled into a report. I apologize for not submitting it through proper channels, but I only received it this morning." Patricia looked like she couldn't decide whether to be furious or impressed. Judge Brenner gestured for Vincent to approach the bench. "I'll need to review this before it can be admitted as evidence," she said, taking the phone and scrolling through the documents Vincent had pulled up. Her expression grew darker with each page. After several long minutes, she looked up. "I'm going to call a 30-minute recess. All parties remain available. Mr. Brennan, I suggest you and your client have a serious conversation about the direction of this case." The bailiff called the recess, and the courtroom erupted into controlled chaos. Marcus and his lawyers huddled in an angry knot. Patricia pulled Ava and Vincent aside into the hallway. "You had an investigative report prepared and didn't tell me?" Patricia hissed at Vincent. "I wasn't sure we'd need it," Vincent said calmly. "I wanted Ava to have the option of not bringing up the abuse if she wasn't ready." "That's not how this works. I'm her attorney. I need to know." "It's okay," Ava interrupted. She was still shaking, but something had shifted inside her. The truth was out now, in all its ugly reality. No more hiding, no more pretending. "Thank you, Vincent, for giving me the choice." Patricia took a deep breath, visibly collecting herself. "Fine. Okay. The judge is reviewing evidence of abuse, which changes everything. But we need to prepare for them to pivot their strategy. They might—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she looked past Ava toward the elevator bank. Ava turned to see a group of men in dark suits stepping off the elevator. They moved with the kind of coordinated purpose that suggested they weren't here for a friendly visit. At their center was a man who looked like he could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. Vincent tensed beside her, his entire demeanor changing in an instant. "Vincent Kane," the man in the center said, his accent thick, Russian or Eastern European. "We need to talk." "Not here, Dmitri," Vincent said quietly. "This isn't the time." "We disagree." Dmitri's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You've been avoiding our calls, so we come to you, and we find you in family court, playing house with a waitress and her son. This is unexpected." Ava's blood ran cold. These were the people Vincent had warned her about, the dangerous associates, the enemies who would see any attachment as weakness. "I said not here," Vincent repeated, his voice hardening. "Or what?" Dmitri spread his hands in mock innocence. "You'll call security? In a courthouse? I think not." "No, Vincent, I think you'll listen. Because we have a business problem, and you've been too distracted to address it." "Mr. Kane," Patricia said nervously, "who are these people?" "Business associates," Vincent said tightly. "Give me 5 minutes to handle this." "You don't have 5 minutes," the bailiff called from the courtroom door. "Judge Brenner is ready to reconvene." Dmitri's eyes gleamed with malicious amusement. "Then you have a choice to make, Vincent. Business or your new little family. Which matters more?" For a terrible moment, Ava thought Vincent might actually walk away, might choose whatever dangerous business he conducted over staying to see this custody battle through. And who could blame him? He'd already done more than anyone could expect from a stranger. But Vincent didn't move toward Dmitri. Instead, he turned to one of the courthouse security guards. "These men are attempting to intimidate a witness in an ongoing proceeding," he said clearly. "I'm requesting they be removed from this floor." Dmitri's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake." "No," Vincent said, meeting his eyes directly. "I'm making a choice. And you're leaving." The security guards, perhaps sensing the potential for violence, called for backup. Within moments, Dmitri and his associates were being escorted toward the elevators, though not before Dmitri called back, "This isn't finished, Kane." "It never is," Vincent muttered. Ava grabbed his arm as they headed back toward the courtroom. "Vincent, what was that? What did you just—" "I told you I had enemies," Vincent said, his jaw tight. "They just found new leverage, but we'll deal with it later. Right now, we finish this." They re-entered the courtroom to find Marcus and his lawyers looking grim. Whatever conversation they'd had during the recess had clearly not gone well for them. Judge Brenner waited until everyone was seated before speaking. "I've reviewed Mr. Kane's documentation regarding the history of domestic violence in Mrs. Kane's previous marriage. The evidence is compelling. Hospital visits consistent with physical assault, police calls to the residence that match Mrs. Kane's timeline, and statements from neighbors who witnessed verbal and emotional abuse." She turned to Marcus, her expression cold. "Mr. Chen, I find it deeply troubling that you filed for primary custody while concealing a pattern of domestic violence. Your attorneys may not have known, but you certainly did." "Your Honor, those allegations are—" Brennan began. "The evidence speaks for itself, Counselor." Judge Brenner cut him off. "Now that brings us to the current situation. Mrs. Kane has technically satisfied the requirements this court set forth. She has stable housing, a two-parent household, and demonstrated means of support. However, the circumstances under which this was achieved are highly irregular." Ava's heart sank. Here it came, the ruling that would say her efforts weren't enough, that the arrangement was too suspicious, that Eli deserved better than a mother who'd married a stranger out of desperation. "That said," Judge Brenner continued, "I'm not in the business of punishing people for finding unconventional solutions to impossible situations. Mrs. Kane was backed into a corner by an abusive ex-husband using the legal system as another tool of control. She found a way out. Whether that makes her desperate or resourceful is a matter of perspective." The judge looked at Eli, who was sitting quietly with the child advocate, swinging his legs and looking at a picture book. "What I care about is that child's welfare. And based on everything I've seen today, including the new evidence regarding Mr. Chen's history of violence, I'm not convinced that Eli would be better off in his father's custody." Marcus half rose from his seat. "Your Honor." "Sit down, Mr. Chen. I'm not finished." Judge Brenner's tone brooked no argument. "Here's my ruling. Primary custody remains with Mrs. Kane, Mr. Chen's visitation will continue to be supervised until he completes a court-ordered domestic violence intervention program and anger management counseling. The marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Kane will remain under court review for the next 6 months. If at any point it appears this was indeed a fraudulent arrangement, custody arrangements may be revisited." She paused, looking directly at Ava. "Mrs. Kane, I'm trusting that you're acting in your son's best interests. Don't make me regret that trust." "I won't, Your Honor," Ava whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. As for you, Mr. Kane," Judge Brenner's gaze shifted to Vincent. "I don't know what your motivations are, and frankly, that's between you and your wife. But if you've inserted yourself into this child's life, you'd better be prepared to follow through. Children don't understand complicated arrangements. They understand who shows up for them." "Understood, Your Honor," Vincent said quietly. "Then we're adjourned." The gavel came down, and Ava's legs nearly gave out. She'd won. Against all impossible odds, she'd actually won. Eli came running over, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Mama, can we go home now, to the dinosaur room?" "Yes, baby," Ava sobbed, pulling him close. "We can go home." Marcus tried to approach, but his lawyers held him back, steering him toward the exit. The look he shot Ava was pure venom. This wasn't over, his expression said. He'd find another way. But for now, for this moment, Ava had her son. And that was everything. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook Vincent's hand. That was risky, producing evidence at the last minute, but it worked. "Sometimes risk is necessary," Vincent said. "I'll file the official paperwork and keep you updated on the 6-month review process. In the meantime, Mrs. Kane," she turned to Ava, "I'd recommend you and your husband start building a paper trail. Joint bank accounts, shared expenses, evidence of an actual marriage. The court will be watching." After Patricia left, the three of them stood on the courthouse steps. The afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, warm on Ava's face. "Thank you," she said to Vincent, the words feeling inadequate. I don't know how to. I can never repay. You don't have to, Vincent said simply. He crouched down to Eli's level. Hey, buddy, you hungry? I know a place that makes really good grilled cheese sandwiches. Can we go there? Eli asked, his earlier confusion about courts and judges already fading with the resilience of childhood. Absolutely. As they walked toward the car, Ava felt the weight of the past months lifting fractionally. She wasn't naive enough to think all her problems were solved. Marcus would keep fighting, the court would keep watching, and those dangerous men who'd confronted Vincent weren't going to simply disappear. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she wasn't facing everything alone. Vincent held the car door open for her, his hand steady on her elbow as she climbed in. Their eyes met for just a moment, an acknowledgement of everything that had just transpired, everything that still lay ahead. We'll figure it out, he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. And despite everything, despite the lies and the danger and the impossible complexity of what they'd created, Ava found herself believing him. The car pulled away from the courthouse, carrying them toward the home that had appeared like magic overnight, toward a future that was uncertain but no longer hopeless. In the back seat, Eli chattered about dinosaurs and grilled cheese, blissfully unaware of how close he'd come to losing everything. Ava reached over and took Vincent's hand. He squeezed back, a silent promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. For better or worse, they were in this now, all the way. The grilled cheese sandwiches turned out to be from a small cafe 3 blocks from the house, the kind of neighborhood place where the owner knew regulars by name. Eli had devoured his along with chocolate milk, chattering between bites about the toy dinosaurs Vincent had promised to show him when they got home. Ava had barely touched her food, her stomach still twisted in knots despite the victory at the courthouse. Vincent had watched her push lettuce around her plate for 10 minutes before finally speaking. You need to eat something. I know, I just can't stop thinking about what happens next. What happens next is we go home, Eli plays with his dinosaurs, and you take a breath for the first time in months. Ava had wanted to believe it could be that simple, but the memory of Dimitri's cold eyes and veiled threats hung over her like a storm cloud that hadn't yet decided whether to break. Now, back at the house, she stood at the kitchen window watching Eli explore the backyard. Vincent had installed a swing set at some point in the last 24 hours, and Eli was testing it cautiously, as if afraid it might disappear if he enjoyed it too much. He's going to need time to trust that this is permanent, Vincent said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one without asking if she wanted it. So am I, Ava admitted, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Vincent, those men at the courthouse, you said you'd deal with it later. It's later. Vincent's jaw tightened. They're associates of the Volkov brothers. I've been trying to extract myself from certain business arrangements, and they're not happy about it. What kind of business arrangements? The kind where goods move through shipping routes without proper documentation. The kind where money changes hands and questions aren't asked. He met her eyes directly. I told you I operated in gray areas. This is what that looks like. Ava's stomach churned. And now they know about me and Eli. They know you care about something other than business. Which makes you leverage, Vincent confirmed grimly. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated they might try something like this, but I didn't think they'd be bold enough to approach me in a courthouse. What do they want? A bigger cut of profits from the shipping operation. And for me to stop asking questions about where certain cargo is going. Vincent set his coffee down, his hands gripping the counter edge. I've been trying to clean up my operations, shift everything to legitimate business. But these partnerships don't dissolve easily. People who operate in the shadows don't just let you walk away into the light. So what are you going to do? Protect you and Eli, whatever it takes. The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring, but it only made Ava more anxious. Vincent, I can't. I won't let my son become collateral damage in some criminal power struggle. If being here puts him in danger, being with Marcus put him in danger, Vincent interrupted. Different kind of danger, but danger nonetheless. At least here, I can control the variables. I have security, resources, ways of handling threats that you wouldn't have on your own. I don't want my son growing up around violence. Neither do I. Vincent turned to face her fully. Ava, I meant what I said in court. I'm getting out of the illegal side of my business. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'm working on it. The Volkovs are a problem, but they're a problem I can solve. How? By giving them what they want, or making them think I am while I build a case against them that will get them arrested or deported before they can retaliate. Ava stared at him. You're going to turn them into the police? To the FBI, actually. I've been cooperating with a federal investigation for the past 6 months. That's why I've been pulling back from certain operations. I'm building a case that will take down the entire Eastern European trafficking network operating through the port. He paused. That's not public knowledge. You're the only person outside of law enforcement who knows. The revelation hit Ava like a wave. You're working with the FBI? But in court, when the judge asked about investigations, I said I'd been investigated and not charged, which is true. What I didn't say is that I'm now cooperating with those investigators. Vincent's expression was carefully neutral. It's complicated. I'm not some hero turning state's evidence out of the goodness of my heart. I cut a deal. I give them the Volkovs and their operation, and in exchange I get immunity for my past involvement and a clean slate going forward. So you're actually trying to go legitimate. I told you that helping you was the first genuinely good thing I'd done in years. I wasn't exaggerating. Vincent's voice softened. I've spent 20 years building an empire that's half legal and half criminal. I'm rich. I'm powerful. And I'm completely empty. When I saw you in that diner, I saw a chance to be something other than what I've become. A chance to actually matter to someone. Ava felt tears prickling at her eyes. You barely know me. I know you love your son more than your own life. I know you were willing to marry a dangerous stranger to keep him safe. I know you're stronger than you think you are. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek. And I know that for the first time in my life, I want to be the kind of man who deserves to be trusted with that strength. Before Ava could respond, the doorbell rang. Vincent's entire demeanor shifted instantly, his hand moving to his pocket where Ava suddenly realized he probably carried a weapon. Stay with Eli, he said quietly. Don't come to the door. He walked toward the front of the house with the controlled tension of someone expecting trouble. Ava moved to the back door, positioning herself where she could see Eli, but also hear what was happening at the front entrance. She heard Vincent open the door, heard a familiar voice that made her blood run cold. Mr. Kane, I hope I'm not interrupting. Marcus. Ava's hands clenched into fists. What was he doing here? How did he even know the address? You are interrupting, Vincent said coldly. Leave. I just want to talk to my son. 5 minutes. Surely that's not too much to ask. The court order specifies supervised visitation. This isn't supervised, and you weren't invited. Leave before I call the police. I'm his father. Marcus's voice rose with barely contained rage. You can't keep me from my own child. This whole thing is a fraud, and we both know it. You think I'm going to let some criminal take my place? I think you're going to follow the court order, or you're going to find yourself in contempt. Vincent's voice dropped to something dangerous. And if you ever show up at my house uninvited again, you're going to discover that I have very little patience for men who abuse women and children. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Now get off my property. There was a tense moment of silence, then the sound of footsteps retreating and a car door slamming. An engine revved aggressively before fading into the distance. Vincent came back into the kitchen, his expression thunderous. He's escalating. That's not good. How did he find the address? Ava asked, her voice shaking. Public records. The property deed is in both our names now. He could have looked it up. Vincent pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I'm having a security system installed tomorrow. Cameras, motion sensors, the works, and I'm getting a restraining order filed by end of business today. Vincent, this is getting out of control. Maybe I should what? Go back to living in fear? Give up because the fight is getting harder? Vincent crossed to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Ava, I told you I'd protect you. That means dealing with Marcus and the Volkovs and anyone else who threatens what we're building here. You don't have to fight alone anymore. But this isn't your fight, Ava protested weakly. The moment I walked over to your table in that diner, it became my fight. Vincent's eyes were intense, unwavering. I made a choice, Ava. I'm not backing down from it. Outside, Eli had discovered the sandbox and was building an elaborate dinosaur landscape, completely unaware of the adult tension swirling around him. Watching him play with such innocent joy, Ava felt something shift inside her. Her son deserved this, the safety, the yard, the childhood that wasn't constantly overshadowed by fear. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. We fight." Vincent's expression softened into something that might have been relief. "Together." The word hung between them, weighted with implications that went far beyond their legal arrangement. Ava found herself wondering, not for the first time, what this strange marriage might become if they actually gave it a chance to be real. The thought terrified her almost as much as it intrigued her. That night, after Eli had been bathed and read to and tucked into his dinosaur-themed bed, Ava found herself unable to sleep. She wandered downstairs to find Vincent in his study, working at a massive desk covered in papers and multiple computer monitors. "Sorry," she said from the doorway. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not." Vincent gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Can't sleep?" "Too much adrenaline still." Ava sat, tucking her feet under her. "What are you working on?" "Finalizing the dissolution of several business partnerships. The more I can extract myself from questionable operations before the FBI moves on the Volkovs, the cleaner the break will be." "Is it dangerous?" "What you're doing?" Vincent considered the question. "Everything in my world is dangerous. But yes, this particularly so. The Volkovs aren't going to take kindly to me cutting ties, especially once they realize I'm the one who gave the FBI enough evidence to dismantle their operation." "When will that happen?" "Soon. Weeks, not months." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I won't lie to you, Ava. Things are going to get complicated before they get better. But I have contingencies in place. Security, safe houses, legal protection. You and Eli will be shielded from as much of it as possible." "You keep saying things like that you'll protect us, that you have plans. But Vincent, why? Why take on all this risk for people you barely know?" It was the question she'd been afraid to ask directly, the one that kept her awake wondering if there was some hidden agenda she was too naive to see. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the arm of his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "When I was 12, my mother left my father. He was abusive, not physically, but emotionally, financially. He controlled everything, and she had nothing, no money, no education, no way out." He paused, his jaw tight. "She tried anyway. Took me and my sister and ran. We lived in shelters for a while, then a series of terrible apartments. She worked 3 jobs trying to keep us fed." Ava's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to share something so personal. "When I was 15, she got sick. Cancer. She couldn't afford treatment, couldn't take time off work. By the time she finally saw a doctor, it was too late." Vincent's eyes were distant, lost in memory. "She died 6 months later. My sister and I ended up in foster care. She got adopted by a decent family. I aged out of the system at 18. "Vincent, I'm so sorry." "The point is," he continued, "I spent my entire childhood watching my mother fight impossible battles alone, watching her sacrifice everything and still lose. And I swore that if I ever had the power to help someone in that situation, I would, no matter what it cost me." "So that's what this is? Keeping a promise to your mother?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's trying to rewrite an ending I couldn't change the first time." Vincent met her eyes directly. "When I saw you in that diner crying over court papers with 12 hours to save your son, I saw my mother, and I couldn't walk away." Ava felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "She'd be proud of you for helping us." "Don't know about that. She'd probably be horrified by half the things I've done to get the money and power to be able to help." Vincent's smile was bitter. "But maybe this, helping you, getting out of the criminal side of my business, trying to do something good, maybe this is how I finally make peace with her memory." Without thinking about it, Ava stood and crossed to his side of the desk. Vincent looked up at her, surprised as she reached for his hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me, for helping us, for being honest about why." Vincent's hand closed around hers, warm and solid. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You gave me back my son and my hope." That deserves acknowledgement. They stood like that for a moment, hands clasped, the space between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Then Ava stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were, how easy it would be to lean into the comfort he was offering. "I should let you get back to work," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "Ava?" Vincent's voice stopped her at the door. "What I said earlier, about wanting to be the kind of man who deserves to be trusted, I meant it. Whatever happens with the Volkovs or Marcus or the court review, I'm not going anywhere. You and Eli are safe here. That's not conditional." Ava nodded, not trusting her voice. Then she fled upstairs before she could do something foolish like cry or, worse, kiss him. The next 3 weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Vincent had the security system installed as promised, along with a restraining order that kept Marcus at a legally mandated distance. Eli started at a new school in the Riverside Park District, and Ava marveled at how quickly he adapted, making friends and bringing home artwork that Vincent displayed on the refrigerator like proud parents had done since the invention of refrigerator magnets. Ava had quit both her waitressing jobs, though it had taken Vincent 3 days of gentle persuasion to convince her. He'd pointed out that the court wanted to see household stability, that Eli needed her available for school pickup and homework help, that they needed to build the appearance of a real marriage. And that was hard to do when she worked 70 hours a week. "I can't just live off your money," she'd protested. "Why not? We're married. What's mine is yours." "But it's not real. We have separate bank accounts, separate lives. Then let's change that." Vincent had pulled up his banking app and, before Ava could stop him, added her name to his primary account. "There. Now we have a joint account. The court wants to see financial entanglement? Consider it done." Ava had stared at the balance, 6 figures casually displayed on a phone screen, and felt dizzy. "Vincent, I can't." "You can, and you will. Use it for whatever you and Eli need. Clothes, activities, savings, whatever. Stop fighting me on this." So she'd stopped fighting, though it felt strange to walk into stores without checking price tags, to say yes when Eli asked for the slightly more expensive sneakers with the lights in the soles, to buy herself new clothes that weren't from thrift stores or clearance racks. She'd also started cooking dinner for the 3 of them most nights. It had begun as a way to feel less useless. Vincent was handling security and legal issues and financial stability, and Ava needed to contribute something. But the nightly dinners had evolved into something more than obligation. They'd become a ritual, a space where the 3 of them could pretend to be a normal family. Vincent would ask Eli about school, listening with genuine interest as the boy described playground politics and art class projects. Eli would ask Vincent about his work, and Vincent would explain complicated business concepts in 6-year-old terms, somehow making real estate development sound like an adventure story. And Ava would watch them both, her heart doing complicated things she wasn't ready to examine too closely. But beneath the domestic tranquility, tension simmered. Vincent spent increasing amounts of time in his study, doors closed, voice low on phone calls that ended abruptly when she walked by. The FBI agent he was working with, a woman named Sarah Chen, who shared no relation to either Marcus or Ava's neighbor, had started visiting the house after Eli was asleep, reviewing documents and strategy in hushed conferences that Ava was politely excluded from. "It's for your protection," Vincent had explained when she'd asked why she couldn't be part of those meetings. "The less you know about the specifics of the investigation, the safer you are if things go sideways." Things going sideways meaning what, exactly? Meaning the Volkovs figuring out I'm cooperating with federal investigators. Meaning retaliation. Meaning I need you to trust me to handle this part. Ava had wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in Vincent's eyes had stopped her. He was carrying enough weight for both of them. The least she could do was let him carry it without adding her anxiety to the load. Then, 3 weeks and 2 days after the court hearing, everything changed. Ava was making breakfast when her phone rang. The number was blocked, which usually meant spam, but something made her answer. "Ava Mercer?" The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "It's Ava Kane now," she corrected automatically, still getting used to the name. "Of course. Mrs. Kane, this is Jennifer Chen, Marcus's wife." Ava's blood turned to ice. "What do you want?" "To talk. Just the 2 of us, woman to woman. I think we may be on the same side, even if it doesn't seem that way." I seriously doubt that. Please, just coffee. 1 hour. I have information you need to hear about Marcus and his plans regarding Eli. Every instinct screamed at Ava to hang up, to tell Vincent, to refuse any contact with anyone associated with Marcus. But the mention of plans regarding Eli made her hesitate. What kind of plans? Ava asked carefully. The kind I can't discuss over the phone. Meet me at Common Grounds Cafe on 5th Avenue at noon. Come alone. If I see you've brought your husband or a lawyer, I'm gone. The line went dead before Ava could respond. She stood in the kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, mind racing. This was a trap. Obviously a trap. Marcus was trying to get to her using his wife as an intermediary. But what if it wasn't? What if Jennifer actually had information that could protect Eli? Ava looked at the clock. 10:30. Vincent was in his study on a conference call with his attorneys. Eli was at school, safe behind security protocols that required ID and password verification for pickup. She could go to the cafe, just listen to what Jennifer had to say, and be back before anyone noticed she was gone. It would be fine. Except it wouldn't be fine, and Ava knew it. Nothing involving Marcus was ever fine, but the fear that he was planning something, that Eli might be in danger, overrode her better judgment. At 11:45, Ava left a note on the kitchen counter saying she'd gone for a walk and would be back soon. She took the car keys Vincent had given her to the sensible sedan he'd insisted on buying so she could drive Eli to school and activities. Then she drove to 5th Avenue, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. Common Grounds was an upscale coffee shop with exposed brick and industrial lighting. Ava spotted Jennifer immediately, a blonde woman in her early 30s, attractive in a carefully maintained way, sitting at a corner table nursing a latte. Mrs. Kane, Jennifer stood as Ava approached. Thank you for coming. I haven't agreed to anything except listening, Ava said, not sitting down yet. Talk fast. Jennifer gestured to the chair across from her. Please, this will go easier if we're not standing. Reluctantly, Ava sat. Up close, she could see that Jennifer looked tired, stressed beneath her perfect makeup. I'm going to be direct, Jennifer said. Marcus is planning to file for another custody modification. He's going to claim that your marriage to Vincent Kane puts Eli in danger because of Kane's criminal associations. Vincent doesn't have criminal associations. He's working with the FBI to take down the Volkov trafficking network. Jennifer's smile was grim. I know. Marcus knows too. He hired a private investigator who's been watching your house, following your husband, documenting everything. Ava's stomach dropped. How long has he been doing this? Since the court hearing. He's obsessed with proving your marriage is a fraud and that Kane is a dangerous criminal. He has photos, surveillance footage, documented meetings between your husband and known crime figures. Jennifer leaned forward. Mrs. Kane, Ava, I'm not here to help Marcus. I'm here to warn you because I don't think Eli should be caught in the crossfire of whatever vendetta Marcus is pursuing. Why are you telling me this? You're married to him. I made a mistake. Jennifer's voice cracked slightly. I thought Marcus was a good man who'd been wronged by his ex-wife. He told me you were unstable, vindictive. I believed him. But after we got married, I started seeing what you must have seen. The anger, the need to control everything, the way he talks about you and Eli like your possessions that were stolen from him. Ava felt a rush of vindication mixed with pity. Has he hurt you? Not yet, but I see it coming, and I'm planning my exit. But that's not why I'm here. Jennifer pulled an envelope from her purse. This is everything the private investigator compiled on Vincent Kane. Marcus is planning to submit it to the court next week as part of an emergency custody petition. I made copies because I thought you deserved to know what's coming. Ava took the envelope with trembling hands. Why are you really helping me? Because I watched Marcus obsess over getting Eli back, and I finally realized it has nothing to do with loving his son. It's about winning. It's about punishing you for leaving him. And I can't... Jennifer's voice broke. I can't be part of using a child as a weapon. I just can't. Before Ava could respond, Jennifer stood abruptly, her eyes widening as she looked past Ava toward the cafe entrance. You need to leave. Now. I thought we weren't being followed, but... Ava turned to see Marcus pushing through the cafe door, his face twisted with rage. Behind him were two men in dark suits, not his lawyers, something else, something worse. You lying bitch, Marcus snarled at Jennifer. I knew you couldn't be trusted. Ava shot to her feet, clutching the envelope. Marcus, whatever you think is happening, I think my wife is consorting with my ex to undermine my custody rights. Marcus spat. And I think you just violated the terms of the restraining order by initiating contact with my family. I didn't initiate anything. She called me. That's not how it's going to look in court. Marcus's smile was vicious. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. I've been recording this whole thing. You meeting with my wife in secret, accepting documents about your husband's criminal activities. The judge is going to love this. Panic flooded through Ava. This was exactly the trap she'd feared, and she'd walked right into it. Marcus, please. I came here because I was worried about Eli, that's all. You came here because you're desperate and stupid, just like you always were. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to something coldly intimate. Did you really think you could replace me with some criminal and everything would be fine? Did you think I'd just let you go? Mr. Chen. One of the men in dark suits stepped forward, his accent thick. Perhaps this conversation should continue somewhere more private. Ava's blood ran cold as she recognized the voice. Not Marcus's men, the Volkov's men. Marcus waved him off impatiently. I'm handling this. Are you? The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Because from where we stand, you're making a scene in a public cafe. Not very discreet. I don't need discretion advice from hired muscle. You hired us to follow your wife and document her meeting with your ex. We did that. But we also recognize that woman. He nodded at Ava. She's Vincent Kane's new wife, which makes her very interesting to our employers. Understanding crashed over Ava like a wave. Marcus hadn't just hired a private investigator. He'd somehow, in his obsessive need to destroy her, made a deal with the very people Vincent was trying to take down. Marcus, what did you do? Ava whispered. I did what I had to do to protect my son from a criminal, Marcus said self-righteously. These gentlemen were very interested to learn about Kane's new family. Apparently he's been keeping you a secret from his business associates. The Volkov associate smiled at Ava, and she felt ice spread through her veins. Mrs. Kane, you're going to come with us, quietly, or we make this difficult for everyone in this cafe. Don't touch her, Jennifer said suddenly, stepping between Ava and the men. Marcus, for Christ's sake, what have you done? These aren't investigators. These are... Shut up, Jennifer. But Jennifer was past caring what Marcus thought. She grabbed Ava's arm. Run. I'll call the police. Everything happened very fast after that. One of the men lunged for Ava. Jennifer screamed. The cafe erupted into chaos as customers scrambled away from what was clearly becoming a violent confrontation. Ava ran, clutching the envelope, her heart hammering. She made it to the parking lot before hands grabbed her from behind, strong and unyielding. Let her go! Vincent's voice cut through the panic like a blade. Ava twisted to see him standing 10 feet away, flanked by Thomas the driver and two other men she didn't recognize. His expression was absolutely cold. The friendly version of himself he showed at dinner completely absent. The Volkov associate holding Ava didn't release her. Kane, we've been looking forward to a conversation with you. Then you should have called my office. Grabbing my wife in a parking lot is poor form, even for you, Alexei. Your wife? Alexei laughed. Yes, we were surprised to learn you'd gotten married. So out of character. Tell me, does she know what you really are? She knows enough. Now let her go before this gets ugly. I think it's already ugly. I think you've been lying to our employers about your commitment to business. I think this marriage is proof you're going soft. And I think we're going to use her to remind you where your loyalties lie. Vincent moved so fast Ava barely saw it. One moment, he was standing 10 feet away. The next, he had Alexei's arm twisted at an angle that made the man gasp and release Ava. Run, Vincent said to her, without looking away from Alexei. Get in the car. Thomas will drive you home. Vincent. Now, Ava. She ran. Thomas bundled her into the black sedan and they were pulling out of the parking lot when Ava looked back to see Vincent and his men facing off against the Volkov associates. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. The coward had apparently fled the moment actual violence became imminent. Is he going to be okay? Ava asked Thomas, her voice shaking. Mr. Kane can handle himself, Thomas said calmly, but his hands were tight on the steering wheel. They were 3 blocks from home when Ava's phone rang. Vincent. Are you safe? His voice was tight. Yes. Thomas is driving me home. Vincent, what? I'm handling it. But Ava, you need to listen to me very carefully. What you did today, meeting with Jennifer Chen without telling me, was incredibly dangerous. I know, I'm sorry. She said Marcus was planning something and I understand why you did it, but from now on, no decisions without talking to me first. The Volkovs know about you and Eli now. That changes everything. He paused, and she heard sirens in the background. The FBI is moving up their timeline. They're executing warrants tonight. I need you to pack a bag for you and Eli. Essentials only. Thomas is going to take you somewhere safe until this is over. What? No, Vincent, I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. It's not safe for you here anymore. Then it's not safe for you either. I can protect myself. I can't protect you and fight the Volkovs at the same time. Please, Ava, for Eli's sake. The mention of her son cut through her panic. Where are you sending us? A property upstate. Secure location, off any grid the Volkovs might have access to. You'll be there for a few days, maybe a week, just until the FBI makes their arrests and the situation stabilizes. Ava wanted to argue, wanted to refuse to be separated from him when everything was falling apart. But she thought about Eli, about the envelope Jennifer had given her still clutched in her hand, about men grabbing her in parking lots. Okay, she whispered. Okay. But Vincent, you have to promise me you'll be careful. I promise. And Ava, I'm sorry. I should have anticipated Marcus would do something this reckless. I should have protected you better. This isn't your fault. It is, actually, but we'll discuss that later. I have to go. Thomas will explain everything. The line went dead. Ava sat in the back of the sedan, mind reeling as they pulled into the driveway of the house that had started to feel like home. She had 30 minutes to pack and pick up Eli from school before they disappeared into protective custody. And all she could think about was Vincent, facing down dangerous men alone, gambling everything on an FBI operation that might or might not succeed. This was supposed to be safer than her old life, she thought bitterly. This was supposed to fix everything. Instead, she'd traded one kind of danger for another, and this time she wasn't the only one at risk. The safe house was a cabin 2 hours north of the city, tucked into dense woods where the silence felt oppressive after weeks of urban noise. Eli had fallen asleep in the car, exhausted by the confusion of being pulled from school early and told they were going on an adventure. Ava had carried him inside and settled him into one of the bedrooms, her heart breaking at how easily he trusted that everything would be okay. Now she stood at their window overlooking nothing but trees and darkness, her phone clutched in her hand, willing it to ring. Thomas had stayed for an hour after they'd arrived, doing a security sweep and explaining the protocols. There were panic buttons in every room, cameras on all approaches to the property, and a direct line to both local law enforcement and Vincent's security team. Food had been stocked in the refrigerator, though Ava couldn't imagine eating anything. Mr. Kane will call when he can, Thomas had said before leaving. Try to rest, Mrs. Kane. You're safe here. But Ava didn't feel safe. She felt like she was hiding while Vincent walked into a war zone, and the helplessness was eating her alive. She'd tried calling him 3 times in the past 2 hours. Each call had gone straight to voicemail. She'd texted. No response. The silence was worse than any news could have been. At midnight, unable to stand the waiting anymore, Ava opened the envelope Jennifer had given her. Inside were surveillance photos, detailed reports, and timeline documents that painted a damning picture of Vincent's activities over the past 6 months. Meeting with known criminals, entering warehouses at odd hours, exchanging briefcases with men whose mugshots appeared in federal databases. To anyone who didn't know the context, it looked exactly like what Marcus wanted it to look like, proof that Vincent Kane was deeply embedded in organized crime. But Ava did know the context. These weren't criminal meetings. They were Vincent gathering evidence, building the case that would bring down the Volkov operation. Every suspicious encounter was him digging deeper into the network, documenting shipments and money flows and connections that the FBI could use. Marcus didn't understand what he was looking at. Or maybe he didn't care. Either way, if this evidence made it to family court, it would be devastating. The judge would see a child living in the home of a man who associated with criminals, and no amount of explaining that it was part of a federal investigation would make that image go away. Ava was about to set the photos aside when she noticed something odd. Several pictures showed Vincent meeting with a woman, dark hair, professional clothing, always carrying a briefcase. The same woman appeared again and again in different locations, clearly not a random encounter. Ava pulled out her phone and zoomed in on one of the clearer shots. The woman's face was partially visible, and something about her seemed familiar. Then it clicked. She'd seen this woman before, leaving the house late at night 3 weeks ago after one of those closed-door meetings. This was Agent Sarah Chen, the FBI handler, which meant Marcus's private investigator had been photographing Vincent meeting with federal law enforcement and had documented it as evidence of criminal activity. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so dangerous. A sound from outside made Ava freeze. She killed the lights and moved to the window, her heart hammering. Headlights were cutting through the darkness, coming up the long driveway. Her first instinct was panic. The Volkovs had found them. But then she recognized the car, Vincent's black SUV. Ava ran to the door, yanking it open as Vincent climbed out of the vehicle. He looked exhausted, his shirt untucked, a bruise darkening his jaw, but he was alive and whole, and here. "You're supposed to be in the city," Ava said, relief and anger warring in her chest. "You're supposed to be safe behind FBI protection, or—" Vincent crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was sudden and fierce, his face buried in her hair, his whole body tense like he was holding on to something precious that had almost slipped away. "I had to see you," he said roughly. "Had to make sure you were really okay." Ava's arms came up around him automatically, her hands fisting in his shirt. "I'm fine. Eli's fine. What happened?" "Did the FBI simultaneous raids at 4 locations? They arrested 18 people, including both Volkov brothers and most of their upper management." Vincent pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands framing her jaw. "It's over. The network is done." "And you? Are you—" "I testified before a grand jury 3 hours ago. Everything I've been gathering for the past 6 months, all the evidence, it's in federal hands now. My immunity agreement is signed." He let out a shaky breath. "I'm out. Completely out. No more gray areas, no more illegal operations, just legitimate business from here on." Ava felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Vincent, you could have been killed. When they grabbed me at the cafe, when you faced them down—" "I know. I'm sorry. That should never have happened." His thumb brushed away her tears. "Marcus making contact with the Volkovs was something I didn't anticipate. My arrogance, thinking I could keep you separate from that world. But it's done now. The people who could hurt you are either in federal custody or running for their lives." "What about Marcus?" Vincent's expression darkened. "The FBI picked him up for questioning about his association with the Volkovs. Turns out hiring known criminals to harass your ex-wife is frowned upon. His lawyers are scrambling, but he's facing potential charges for obstruction of justice and conspiracy." "Will he go to prison?" "Probably not, but his credibility is destroyed. Any custody petition he files now will be dead on arrival." Vincent's hands were still on her face, his eyes searching hers. "You're free, Ava. You and Eli are free. Marcus can't hurt you anymore." The word should have brought relief, but instead Ava felt something shift beneath her feet. Free meant the danger was over. Free meant the desperate circumstances that had driven her into Vincent's arms no longer existed. Free meant the arrangement that had brought them together had served its purpose. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. Vincent seemed to understand the real question behind her words. His hands dropped away from her face, and he took a step back, suddenly uncertain in a way she'd never seen him before. "That depends on what you want," he said carefully. "The court will complete its 6-month review, but with Marcus under federal investigation and no ongoing threat to Eli's safety, there's no reason you'd lose custody. You could file for divorce, and I'd make sure you and Eli were financially secure. Set you up with your own place, trust fund for Eli's education, whatever you need." "You'd just let us go? After everything?" "I promised you this was your choice, that if you wanted out, we'd handle it cleanly." Vincent's voice was steady, but Ava could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. "I meant it. You don't owe me anything, Ava. You never did." Ava stared at him, this man who'd appeared in her darkest moment like an answer to a prayer she'd been too desperate to articulate. He'd given her everything: safety, stability, hope. He'd protected her son, faced down criminals, risked his freedom and his life. And now he was offering to walk away because he thought that's what she wanted. What if I don't want out? The words came out barely above a whisper. Vincent went very still. What? What if I want to stay? What if I want to try making this real? Ava's voice grew stronger as she spoke. Not because I'm desperate or because I need protection, but because somewhere in the past month this started to feel like more than an arrangement, at least for me. Ava. Vincent's voice was rough with something that might have been hope. You don't have to say that because you feel obligated. I'm not obligated. For the first time in my life, I'm completely free to choose. And I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. She stepped closer, closing the distance he'd created. If you want me to. If this is something you want too. Vincent's hands came up to her shoulders, gripping gently like he was afraid she might disappear. I've wanted this since the morning I watched you make breakfast while Eli told you about his dreams. Since the first time you laughed at something stupid I said. Since I realized that the emptiness I'd been feeling for years disappeared when you were in the room. His voice dropped. I didn't think I had the right to ask you to stay. Not after I pulled you into this mess. You didn't pull me into anything. You saved me from drowning, and then you stayed, even when it got dangerous. Ava's hands found his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. I don't know what a real marriage looks like. Mine with Marcus was a nightmare, and my parents weren't exactly a model of healthy relationships. But I'd like to try figuring it out. With you, if you're willing. Instead of answering with words, Vincent kissed her. It was nothing like the chaste peck at the courthouse when they'd first married. This was real and desperate and full of all the emotion they'd been carefully not acknowledging for weeks. Ava melted into it, her fingers tangling in his hair, her whole body coming alive with a feeling she'd almost forgotten existed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I'm willing, he said roughly. More than willing. But Ava, you need to understand I'm not good at this. Relationships, emotions, any of it. I've spent 20 years building walls and I don't know how to take them down. Then we'll figure it out together. Ava smiled against his lips. No more walls, no more pretending this is just a business arrangement. We tell each other the truth, even when it's hard. Starting now? Starting now. Vincent pulled back enough to look at her properly, his expression serious. Then the truth is I'm terrified. Terrified of failing you, of not being the husband and father you and Eli deserve. Terrified that you'll wake up one day and realize you settled for someone because you had no other options. And the truth is I'm terrified too, Ava admitted. Terrified of trusting someone again after Marcus. Terrified that this feeling is too good to be real. But Vincent, being scared of something doesn't mean we don't do it. It means we do it anyway and hold on tight. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise instead of a question. Then he scooped her up, making her yelp in surprise. What are you doing? Taking my wife to bed, Vincent said, carrying her toward the stairs, where we're going to have a long conversation about what comes next, and then I'm going to hold you while we both get some actual sleep, because neither of us has slept properly in weeks. Just sleep? Ava raised an eyebrow. For tonight, just sleep. I want to do this right, Ava. Court you properly. Take you on dates, let Eli adjust to the idea of us being together for real. I don't want you to ever wonder if this was just about convenience or desperation. Ava's heart swelled. After years with a man who'd taken everything and given nothing, here was someone who wanted to give her time, space, choice. Someone who understood that real love was built slowly, with intention and care. Okay, she whispered. We do this right. They spent that night talking in whispers so as not to wake Eli, wrapped in each other's arms. Vincent told her about his plans for the business, how he wanted to transform his empire into something legitimate and meaningful. Ava told him about dreams she'd buried for years, going back to school, maybe studying social work so she could help other women escape abusive situations. I'll support whatever you want to do, Vincent said, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. School, career, anything. You don't have to ask permission or justify it. Your dreams matter. Ava had cried a little at that, overwhelmed by the simple, radical notion that she was allowed to want things for herself. Somewhere around 3 a.m, they finally fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in longer than Ava could remember, She didn't have nightmares. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows and she could hear Eli's voice downstairs, chattering excitedly about something. Vincent's side of the bed was empty, but she could smell coffee and what might have been pancakes. Ava pulled on a robe and padded downstairs to find Vincent and Eli in the kitchen, both covered in flour. Eli was standing on a chair, carefully pouring batter onto a griddle, while Vincent supervised with the patience of a man who'd clearly never made pancakes with a 6-year-old before. "Mama!" Eli spotted her and beamed. "Vincent's teaching me to make pancakes, but I spilled some on the floor, and on Vincent, and on me." "I can see that," Ava laughed, taking in the disaster zone that had once been a clean kitchen. Vincent looked up, his hair sticking up in odd directions, flour on his cheek, and smiled at her with such open affection that Ava's breath caught. This was what she'd been afraid to hope for, not just safety or stability, but genuine happiness. A family that chose each other. "Morning," Vincent said softly. "Coffee's fresh, and breakfast will be ready in approximately—" He checked the smoking griddle and grimaced. "Never, apparently. I think we've created charcoal." Eli giggled, completely unbothered by the burnt pancakes. "It's okay. We can try again." "That's the spirit," Vincent said, scraping the blackened mess into the trash. "Third time's the charm, right?" Ava poured herself coffee and settled at the kitchen table, watching her son and her husband work together, bickering good-naturedly about proper pancake flipping technique. The domesticity of it all should have felt surreal after everything they'd been through, but instead, it felt right, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Morrison. "Good news? Marcus's emergency custody petition has been withdrawn. His lawyers are advising him to focus on his own legal troubles. Court review will proceed as scheduled, but barring any unforeseen complications, I expect it to conclude favorably in 3 months. How's the safe house?" Ava typed back, "We're good, better than good. Thank you for everything." The response came immediately. "My pleasure. Give my best to your husband. He's one of the good ones." Ava looked up at Vincent, who was now wearing more pancake batter than the griddle held, patiently helping Eli create something that might generously be called breakfast if you squinted hard enough. One of the good ones. Yes, she thought. He really was. They spent 2 more days at the cabin, a strange little bubble away from the world where they could figure out how to be a family without the pressure of courts and criminals and chaos. Vincent taught Eli to fish in the lake behind the property, though neither of them caught anything. Ava read books on the porch, while the 2 boys, because Vincent approached fishing with the same enthusiasm as a 6-year-old, argued about the best bait strategies. In the evenings, after Eli went to bed, Vincent and Ava would sit by the fireplace and talk about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved old movies and terrible puns. He learned that she could sing, though she was shy about it, and that she had a wicked sense of humor hidden under years of survival mode. And they kissed, slow and sweet, building towards something more but never rushing, taking their time, learning each other. On the 3rd day, they packed up and drove back to the city. The house in Riverside Park felt different now. Not a temporary shelter or a beautiful prison, but a home. Their home. The first dinner back was chaotic in the best way. Eli insisted on showing Vincent every single drawing he'd made at school that week, which led to a lengthy discussion about whether pterodactyls were technically dinosaurs. Ava made spaghetti, nothing fancy, just the simple comfort food she'd grown up with, and Vincent declared it the best meal he'd ever eaten, which was objectively false but sweet nonetheless. After Eli was tucked in, they sat together in the study where Vincent had first told Ava about his mother, about his reasons for helping her. He pulled out a thick folder of documents. "I had my lawyers draw these up," he said, handing them to Ava. "Legal papers that establish a trust fund for Eli's education and future needs. It's irrevocable. Even if something happens to me, even if we divorce, he's taken care of." "Vincent, you don't have to—" "I want to. Eli's my son now, in every way that matters. I want him to have opportunities, options. I want him to never feel trapped the way my mother did, the way you did." Ava looked through the documents with tears in her eyes. The amount of money Vincent had set aside was staggering, enough to pay for any university, to start a business, to weather any storm life might throw at Eli. "There's more," Vincent continued, pulling out another set of papers. "I'm restructuring my business holdings. creating a foundation focused on helping domestic violence survivors, legal assistance, housing, job training, childcare, everything women need to escape and rebuild. Vincent, Ava's voice broke. I want to do something that matters, Ava. And helping people like you, like my mother, that matters. I was thinking you could help run it, if you want. Use your experience to shape the programs, make sure they actually help, instead of just looking good on paper. You want me to run a foundation? I want you to have purpose and agency and a way to turn your pain into something that helps others. Vincent took her hands in his. But only if you want to. No pressure. You can go back to school, start any career you want, or just focus on being Eli's mom. Whatever makes you happy. Ava thought about it, about taking the worst experience of her life and transforming it into something that could save other women, about being the help she desperately needed and couldn't find, about creating something meaningful alongside this man who kept surprising her with his thoughtfulness. I want to do it, she said firmly. I want to help. Vincent's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Then we'll do it together. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Ava felt the last of her reservations crumble. This wasn't a marriage of convenience anymore. This was real, solid, built on mutual respect and growing love. When they finally broke apart, Vincent's expression turned serious. There's one more thing we need to talk about, the court review. Patricia says it should go smoothly, but we need to be prepared for them to ask hard questions about our relationship. We tell them the truth, Ava said simply, that we married quickly under difficult circumstances, but we've chosen to make it real, that we're building a life together, raising Eli together, and we're committed to making this work. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is simple. We're two broken people who found each other at the right time. We're healing together, building something new together. That's not a convenient fiction. That's just the truth. Vincent pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. I love you, he said quietly. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe when you threatened to burn down my life if I hurt Eli. Maybe when you chose to trust me in that diner. But I love you, Ava, completely. Ava's heart soared. She'd wondered when they'd get to those words, if they'd feel forced or premature. But hearing them now, wrapped in Vincent's arms, they felt exactly right. I love you too, she whispered. I think I started falling the moment you took the stand and told the truth, risking everything for people you barely knew. I love you, Vincent Kane, and I choose you every day. The next 3 months passed in a blur of domesticity and purpose. Ava enrolled in online classes to start working toward a degree in social work. Vincent worked with architects and program directors to establish the foundation, which they named Haven House in honor of Vincent's mother. Eli thrived in school, made friends, and slowly started calling Vincent Dad without anyone prompting him to do so. The court review came and went with minimal drama. The evaluator visited the house, interviewed all 3 of them separately, and filed a report that praised the stable, loving environment Eli was growing up in. Marcus, facing his own legal battles, didn't contest anything. When the final hearing arrived, Judge Brenner reviewed all the evidence with her characteristic thoroughness. Then she looked at Ava and Vincent, who sat together with their hands clasped, presenting a united front. Mrs. Kane, the judge said, when you first came before this court, you were desperate and alone. The arrangement you made with Mr. Kane was unconventional, to say the least. I had serious doubts about whether it was in Eli's best interests. Ava's hand tightened on Vincent's. However, Judge Brenner continued, the evidence before me now paints a very different picture. Eli is thriving academically and socially. He has a stable home, engaged parents, and a clear sense of security. And you, Mrs. Kane, have transformed from a woman barely surviving to someone building a meaningful life and career. The judge's expression softened fractionally. Sometimes unconventional arrangements work out better than traditional ones. This appears to be one of those times. The court review is complete. Primary custody remains with Mrs. Kane, with no further modifications needed. This case is closed. The gavel came down with finality. Ava let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. It was over. Really, truly over. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook both their hands. Congratulations. You beat the system and came out stronger. Don't let many people manage that. We had good help, Vincent said, shaking her hand warmly. Thank you for everything. After Patricia left, Vincent turned to Ava. So, how does it feel to be officially, permanently free? Terrifying and wonderful all at once, Ava admitted. What do we do now? Now? Vincent pulled her close, right there on the courthouse steps where they'd first walked together as husband and wife. Now we go home. We pick up Eli from school. We have dinner as a family. And we keep building this life we've created, one day at a time. Just like that? Just like that. Vincent kissed her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips. No more courts, no more threats, no more looking over our shoulders. Just us, figuring out how to be happy. Ava smiled against his mouth. I think I can handle that. They walked to the car hand in hand, leaving behind the courthouse and all the battles they'd fought within it. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but hopeful, built on a foundation of trust and choice and love that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes, Ava thought, the best things in life came from the worst moments. Sometimes salvation arrived in the form of a dangerous stranger in a diner at midnight. Sometimes love grew from desperation into something real and lasting. And sometimes, just sometimes, broken people found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The first real test came 6 weeks after the court review ended, on a Saturday morning that started like any other. Ava was in the kitchen making French toast while Eli set the table, carefully arranging forks and napkins the way Vincent had taught him. Vincent was upstairs on a call with the contractors working on Haven House's first residential facility, his voice a low murmur through the ceiling. Then the doorbell rang. Ava wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, expecting a delivery or maybe one of Eli's friends coming over to play. Instead, she found herself face to face with a woman she'd seen only in photographs. Jennifer Chen, looking pale and exhausted, with a small suitcase at her feet and a bruise darkening her left cheekbone. I'm sorry, Jennifer said immediately, her voice shaking. I didn't know where else to go. I left Marcus last night and he's looking for me. I know I have no right to ask, but I need help. Ava should have felt satisfaction seeing Marcus's new wife in the same desperate position she'd once been in. Instead, all she felt was a deep, weary recognition. She knew exactly what courage it had taken for Jennifer to walk away, knew the terror of those first hours when you wondered if you'd made a fatal mistake. Come inside, Ava said, stepping back to let Jennifer enter. Jennifer's eyes widened with surprise and relief. Really? After everything Marcus did, after I was part of hurting you, you also warned me when you didn't have to. You gave me information that helped protect my son, and you're here now because you need the same thing I needed, a safe place to catch your breath. Ava closed the door behind her. Come on, let's get you some coffee. Vincent appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression instantly alert. Ava, everything okay? Jennifer left Marcus, Ava said simply. She needs help. Vincent came down the stairs slowly, his eyes taking in Jennifer's bruised face and terrified posture. Ava could see him calculating, assessing the risk of harboring Marcus's ex-wife, weighing it against the clear need in front of them. Then his expression softened. Welcome to Haven House, unofficial edition, he said quietly. You're safe here. Jennifer burst into tears. Over coffee and French toast that had gone slightly cold, Jennifer told her story in halting sentences. The escalating control, the verbal abuse that had turned physical 2 weeks ago when she'd questioned Marcus about his legal bills. The way he'd isolated her from friends and family made her feel like she was losing her mind. It was exactly what he did to you, Jennifer said to Ava, shame coloring her voice. Everything you tried to tell the court, everything I didn't believe, it was all true. I'm so sorry. You didn't know, Ava said, though part of her wanted to point out that the signs had been there, that Jennifer had chosen not to see them because it was easier. But she remembered her own mother ignoring Ava's carefully worded hints about Marcus, remembered well-meaning friends who'd suggested she was overreacting. Nobody wanted to believe nice men in nice houses could be monsters behind closed doors. I do now, Jennifer said bitterly. And now I'm exactly where you were. No money of my own, no job, nowhere to go. Marcus made sure of that. And he's already calling, texting, saying if I don't come back, he'll make me regret it. Vincent set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. Does he know you're here? No, I took an Uber and had them drop me 3 blocks away, then walked. I was careful. Good. Keep it that way. Vincent pulled out his phone. I'm calling Patricia Morrison. You'll need a restraining order and a divorce attorney. She can handle both. I can't afford... Consider it a favor, Vincent said, or payment for the warning you gave Ava about Marcus's plans. Either way, you're getting legal representation. While Vincent made the call, Ava showed Jennifer to the guest room on the first floor, the one Vincent had been using as a temporary office. You can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure out the rest later. Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed, looking lost. Why are you helping me, after everything? Ava thought about that question, about all the reasons she could give, because she understood what Jennifer was going through, because helping felt better than holding grudges, because Vincent's mother had needed help and didn't get it, and Ava was determined to be the person who showed up when someone was drowning. But what she said was simpler. Because someone helped me when I needed it most. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is extend the same grace you received. I don't deserve grace. None of us do, Ava said gently. That's what makes it grace. Jennifer stayed for 3 weeks. In that time, Patricia helped her file for divorce and obtain a restraining order after Marcus showed up at her mother's house making threats. Vincent quietly arranged for Jennifer to move into one of his rental properties at a drastically reduced rate and connected her with a job opportunity at one of his legitimate business ventures. Ava helped her navigate the practical realities of starting over, opening new bank accounts, building a support system, learning to trust her own judgment again. And through it all, Eli watched. He was too young to understand all the complexities, but he understood enough. He understood that people who needed help sometimes showed up at your door, and you let them in. He understood that his mother and Vincent were the kind of people who chose kindness even when it was complicated. The day Jennifer moved into her new apartment, she hugged Ava tightly at the door. I'll pay you back someday, for all of this. You already are, Ava said. Every time you help someone else who's where you were. That's how this works. We pass it forward. After Jennifer left, Vincent found Ava standing at the kitchen window, watching Eli play in the backyard with the elaborate treehouse Vincent had recently installed. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. You did a good thing, he said quietly. We did a good thing, Ava corrected. I couldn't have helped her without you backing me up. I just provided resources. You provided the thing that actually mattered, understanding, hope, someone who'd been where she was and made it to the other side. Ava turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become so essential to her life that she could barely remember what existing without him felt like. Do you ever regret it, walking over to that table in the diner, taking on all of this? Vincent's answer was immediate and certain. Not for a single second. You and Eli are the best thing that ever happened to me, Ava. You gave my life meaning it never had before. We gave each other meaning, Ava said, standing on her toes to kiss him. That's the deal. We save each other. Every day, Vincent agreed, and kissed her back with a tenderness that still made her heart race even after months of marriage. The official opening of Haven House came in early September, 7 months after that desperate midnight in the diner. The facility was a converted mansion in a quiet neighborhood with 20 beds, a full-time staff of counselors and advocates, childcare services, and job training programs. Everything Ava had wished existed when she was trying to escape Marcus. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a surprising crowd, local politicians, domestic violence advocates, and women from the community who'd heard about the program and wanted to support it. But the speech that mattered most came from Ava, standing at the podium with Vincent and Eli beside her. A year ago, she began, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd, I was a single mother working 2 jobs and barely surviving. I was trapped in a custody battle I couldn't afford, facing a deadline that seemed impossible to meet. I was out of options and out of hope. She looked at Vincent, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then someone I'd never met offered me a lifeline. Not because he knew me, not because I deserved it, but because he believed everyone deserves a chance to escape impossible situations. That gift, That radical act of faith in a stranger changed everything. It gave me my son. It gave me safety. And eventually, it gave me love and partnership and a life I never dreamed I could have. Ava's hand found Eli's, and he squeezed back, his gap-toothed smile bright in the September sunshine. Haven House exists because we believe every woman deserves what I was given: resources, support, and the tools to build a new life. We believe that your past doesn't have to define your future. We believe that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help, and the most powerful thing we can do is answer that call. She paused, emotion thick in her throat. To every woman who walks through these doors, you're not alone anymore. You're not invisible. You're seen, you're valued, and you're going to make it to the other side, because that's what we do here. We help each other survive, and then we help each other thrive. The applause was thunderous. Ava stepped back from the podium, and Vincent was there, his arm sliding around her waist, his kiss pressed to her temple, speaking volumes without words. "Your mother would be so proud," Ava whispered to him. "So would yours," Vincent replied, "even if she doesn't know it yet." That was another bridge Ava had been working on, tentatively reaching out to her mother in Ohio, sending updates about Eli, testing whether reconciliation was possible after years of distance. The responses had been stilted and awkward, but they were responses. It was a start. After the ceremony, they drove home as a family, Eli chattering in the back seat about the cookies at the reception and whether they could get a dog now that they had a big backyard. Vincent and Ava exchanged amused glances over his head, the silent communication of parents who'd learned to work as a team. "Can we?" Eli pressed. "Please, I'll walk it and feed it and teach it tricks." "We'll talk about it," Vincent said, which Ava knew meant they'd be visiting animal shelters within the week because Vincent was completely incapable of denying Eli anything within reason. That night, after Eli was asleep and the house was quiet, Ava and Vincent sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. These had become Ava's favorite moments, the quiet times when they could just exist together without the weight of crisis or obligation. "I got a call today," Vincent said, breaking the comfortable silence. "From Agent Chen." "Sarah, what did she want?" "The Volkov brothers are going to trial next month. She wanted to give me a heads up that I'll likely be called to testify." Vincent's hand tightened on his wine glass. "It'll mean everything becoming public, my cooperation with the FBI, the details of my past involvement in their operations, all of it." "Will that affect your business?" "Some clients won't want the association. I'll lose deals, probably take a financial hit. But the legitimate business is strong enough to weather it." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "What I'm worried about is how it affects you and Eli. Having your husband's criminal past plastered across news coverage, people talking, judging." "Let them talk," Ava said firmly. "Vincent, you cooperated with federal investigators to take down a trafficking network. You helped put dangerous people in prison. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's heroic. I was part of that network first. The good I did doesn't erase the bad." "No, but it matters. You chose to be better, to do better. You used your second chance to actually make the world safer." Ava took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Whatever comes out in that trial, we face it together. That's what marriage means. We don't run when things get hard." Vincent brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You walked over to a crying woman in a diner and offered help when you didn't have to," Ava said simply. "You keep doing that every single day. That's what you did." The trial came and went. The news coverage was intense but brief, a few weeks of headlines about the businessman who'd turned informant. Then the media moved on to other scandals. Vincent's testimony was damning and detailed, putting both Volkov brothers away for decades. Some business relationships cooled, but others strengthened, drawn to Vincent's reputation for integrity and following through on commitments. And through it all, life continued its steady forward momentum. Eli turned 7 and had a birthday party at the house with half his class invited. Haven House served its first residents, 3 women and 5 children who moved in scared and desperate and slowly began rebuilding their lives with support and resources. Ava completed her first year of coursework toward her degree, maintaining a perfect GPA while also managing the foundation's day-to-day operations. Marcus, facing his own legal consequences, had eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony against the Volkov associates he'd hired. He served 6 months in a minimum security facility and was released on probation. His visitation rights with Eli remained supervised and infrequent, and as time passed, he seemed to lose interest entirely, as if his son had only ever been valuable as a possession to fight over rather than a person to love. Eli, for his part, seemed unbothered by his biological father's absence. He had Vincent, who showed up at every school event, helped with homework, taught him to ride a bike, and tucked him in every night with stories and conversations about dreams and fears and everything in between. One Saturday morning, nearly a year after that midnight in the diner, Ava woke to find Vincent's side of the bed empty. She could hear voices downstairs, Vincent's low rumble and Eli's excited chatter. Curious, she pulled on a robe and went to investigate. In the kitchen, she found them making breakfast together, this time with significantly more success than their first attempt. Pancakes were actually pancake-shaped and only lightly browned instead of charred. Eli was carefully arranging fruit on top while Vincent scrambled eggs. "Morning, Mama," Eli beamed at her. "We made you breakfast in bed, but you woke up too early." "Sorry," Ava said, laughing. "Should I go back to bed and pretend to be asleep?" "Nah, it's okay. You can eat at the table." Eli carried his masterpiece pancake over with the serious concentration of someone defusing a bomb. "I made this one special for you. See? The blueberries are a smiley face." "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." Ava kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of syrup and childhood joy. Vincent plated the eggs and brought everything to the table, then pulled out a small box from his pocket. "I have something for you," he said to Ava, his expression suddenly nervous in a way she rarely saw. "Vincent, it's not my birthday, or our anniversary, or it's our new anniversary," he interrupted. "1 year ago today, you walked into that diner. I've been thinking about how that moment changed everything. And I realized I never actually proposed to you. Not really. The first time was a business arrangement, a solution to a legal problem. But this time," he opened the box to reveal a ring, not the simple band they'd bought in haste from the courthouse jewelry shop, but an elegant setting with 3 stones that caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the table. "This time I'm asking because I love you, because I choose you every single day for the rest of my life. Ava Kane, will you marry me again for real this time?" Ava felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, joy overflowing in a way that felt almost painful in its intensity. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." Eli whooped and cheered as Vincent slid the ring onto Ava's finger, replacing the modest band with something that represented everything their marriage had become: multifaceted, brilliant, precious. They kissed across the breakfast table, Eli making exaggerated gagging noises that made them both laugh. And in that moment, Ava felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't the desperate woman crying in a diner anymore. She wasn't Marcus Chen's victim or even a survivor fighting to stay afloat. She was Ava Kane, co-founder of Haven House, student, mother, wife. She was someone who'd been given a miracle and turned it into a mission. She was loved and safe and whole. The second wedding took place a month later, this time with friends and family in attendance. Patricia Morrison served as Ava's maid of honor, and Eli was the ring bearer, taking his duties so seriously that everyone had to bite back smiles. Vincent's sister came from across the country, meeting Ava for the first time and immediately pulling her into a fierce hug. Even Ava's mother made the trip from Ohio, their relationship still fragile but mending slowly. The ceremony was held in the backyard of the Riverside Park house, under a canopy of late autumn leaves. This time, when they exchanged vows, every word was true and chosen and meant. "I promise to choose you every day," Ava said, her hands clasped in Vincent's, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "To build this life with you, to raise our son together, to face whatever comes with honesty and courage. You saved me when I was drowning. Now I promise to be your safe harbor, your home, your partner in everything. I love you, Vincent Kane, today and always." Vincent's voice was rough with emotion as he responded, "I promise to protect you and Eli, not because you need protecting, but because I'm honored to stand beside you. I promise to listen, to trust, to never take for granted the gift of your love. You taught me that power without purpose is meaningless. You gave my life meaning, and I promise to spend every day proving worthy of the faith you had in a stranger in a diner. I love you, Ava, completely." When they kissed this time, it was to cheers and applause from people who knew their story, who understood that this marriage wasn't conventional or traditional, but was real and hard-won and beautiful. At the reception, Ava danced with Eli, who stood on her feet and let her guide him around the makeshift dance floor. Then Vincent cut in, and Eli was passed off to Patricia, who gamely attempted to teach him proper ballroom hold. "Happy?" Vincent murmured in Ava's ear as they swayed together. "Impossibly happy," Ava confirmed. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. That we're real." "We're real," Vincent assured her. Every difficult, beautiful, complicated moment of it. Over Vincent's shoulder, Ava could see Haven House's first resident, a woman named Maria, talking with Jennifer Chen in the corner. Both of them had escaped, rebuilt, and were now helping others do the same. She could see Eli laughing with Vincent's sister, being welcomed into a family that kept expanding to include everyone who needed belonging. She could see her mother watching from the sidelines with an expression that might have been pride. This was what redemption looked like, Ava thought. Not a single moment of transformation, but 1,000 small choices to be better, to do better, to help others while helping yourself heal. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, sensing her distraction. "Everything, nothing. How far we've come." Ava pulled back to look at him properly. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I thought losing Eli was inevitable, that I'd used up all my chances at happiness. And now look at us." "Look at us," Vincent agreed, spinning her gently. "Building something neither of us knew we needed." "I needed you," Ava said. "I just didn't know it until you walked over to that table. Then I guess we both needed saving." The song ended and another began, but they kept dancing, lost in each other and the life they'd created from the wreckage of their separate pasts. Around them, their community celebrated. The people they'd helped, the family they'd built, the future they'd made possible through choosing courage over fear. Later, when the reception wound down and guests began drifting away, Ava found herself back at that same kitchen window where she'd stood so many times watching Eli play. Vincent came up behind her, his arms circling her waist in a gesture that had become as familiar as breathing. "What happens now?" Ava asked, echoing the question she'd asked a year ago on courthouse steps. Vincent's answer was different this time, full of certainty instead of careful hope. "Now we live. We raise our son, run our foundation, build our marriage into something that lasts. We help people, we mess up sometimes, we figure it out together. We choose each other every single day, and we build a life worth living." "Sounds perfect," Ava said, leaning back into his embrace. "It won't always be perfect. There will be hard days, arguments, challenges we can't anticipate." "I know, but we'll face them together. That's the deal, right? We don't have to be perfect. We just have to show up." "Every day," Vincent confirmed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Through the window, they could see Eli in the backyard playing with the rescue dog they'd adopted 3 months ago, a gentle golden retriever mix that Eli had named Dino because of course he had. The dog bounded around while Eli laughed, his joy uncomplicated and pure. This was everything, Ava thought. This moment, this man, this child, this life they'd built from impossible circumstances. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself, wasn't the path she would have chosen if someone had laid out all the options. But it was hers, theirs, real and messy and beautiful and worth every terrifying moment it had taken to get here. "I love you," she said, turning in Vincent's arms to face him properly. "Thank you for walking over to that table. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for giving me a chance to build something new. Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to," Vincent replied. "Thank you for teaching me that some things are worth more than power or money. Thank you for making me want to be better." They kissed slow and sweet, the kind of kiss that held promises and history and hope all at once. Outside, Eli called for them to come play, and they broke apart laughing. "Duty calls," Vincent said. "Our son demands an audience," Ava agreed. They walked outside together, hand in hand, into the golden afternoon light. And as Ava watched Vincent scoop up Eli and spin him around while the dog barked joyfully, she felt a sense of peace she'd been chasing her entire life. She'd been drowning a year ago, going under for the third time with no rescue in sight. And then a stranger had thrown her a lifeline. Not because she deserved it, not because he knew her, but because he'd chosen compassion over apathy. That choice had saved 3 lives, hers, Eli's, and Vincent's too, though he might not have realized he needed saving until he found someone worth living for. Now they were building something bigger than themselves, helping others find their own lifelines, creating ripples of redemption that would extend far beyond their small family. This was what hope looked like, Ava thought, as she joined her husband and son in the grass, laughing as Dino knocked them all over in enthusiastic greeting. This was what happened when broken people chose to heal together instead of alone. This was what love could build when it was given the chance to grow. And it had all started with a desperate plea overheard in a nearly empty diner at midnight, a moment when kindness met desperation and created something neither person expected. Sometimes, Ava knew now, the most extraordinary lives began with the simplest choice: to help, to trust, to believe that better things were possible even when all evidence suggested otherwise. She'd made that choice when she'd said yes to Vincent's impossible offer. He'd made it when he'd walked over to her table, and they kept making it, every single day, choosing each other and choosing hope and choosing to believe that their story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Years from now, Ava knew, she'd look back on this moment, playing in the grass with her husband and son and their ridiculous dog, Haven House serving dozens of families, her degree earned and her purpose clear, and she'd marvel at how far they'd come. She'd tell their story to the women who walked through Haven House's doors, desperate and afraid and certain their lives were over. And she'd tell them what she now knew to be true: that 12 hours can change everything, that strangers can become family, that desperation can transform into purpose, that the end of one life can be the beginning of something infinitely better. That sometimes, when you're drowning, all you need is one person willing to dive in after you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that rescue becomes a partnership, becomes a love story, becomes a mission, becomes a legacy. Ava Kane had been given an impossible gift one desperate midnight, and she'd spent every day since then paying it forward, building a life and a foundation and a family that proved miracles were real and love could heal and redemption was always possible, even for a struggling waitress who'd run out of time, even for a dangerous man who'd forgotten how to be good, even for a 6-year-old boy who deserved better than the hand he'd been dealt. They'd found each other in the darkness, and they'd built something that shone, and they'd keep building it together for all the days to come.